think we're almost all here, but we're happy to see so many faces joining us tonight. And we welcome to those of you who are joining us for the live feed of this meeting. We love that we have so many people paying attention. So thank you for being here. We're just waiting for a couple more people to join us. I think we've got some technology issues trying to connect. Does everybody have power? That was quite the storm, right?
Yes.
I'm glad you're all survived and you're all here. Well, we could begin by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody would like to stand and join me in the pledge, I will lead it. Please repeat after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and sorry for my stumble. We have a full agenda tonight. We're happy to have started school yesterday. Looking forward to hearing about that. These are good times. We still have one board member who's having a hard time connecting. So if you can all be patient, let's just wait for her to join us. There we go. Welcome to Board Member Sweat.
I'm so sorry. I just keep having problems with my internet up in my neighborhood. Hello, everyone.
We said the pledge. I'm sorry we didn't wait for you on that, but know that we did take care of that. And welcome to everybody who's joining us on this call, on this WebEx meeting, and then also everybody who's participating in the live stream. I would like to start with our consent agenda. I'll take a motion on the consent agenda. Actually, while I'm waiting for that, for you to think about that consent agenda, I would like to extend an additional welcome. I unfortunately always forget to do this, but not because they aren't important people. Really happy to welcome our representatives of our associations. James Tobler represents SLEA, Dallin Miller representing SLASA, B. Alonzo, who represents our child nutrition department, Ben Rowley, who represents transportation, Eric Adams, representing buildings and grounds, and Cindy Mills, who always participates and represents SLEOPA. We really appreciate the work that you're doing. to help our students. This is crazy times, but we appreciate you participating in our board meetings and the work you do. We also have quite a few of the superintendent's cabinet joining us as well, and district leaders who are participating in the meeting. We welcome you and thank you for your participation and your good work.
Okay, do you want me to make a
If you're
motion?
willing,
Yep.
I'll take the motion on consent.
I move that we accept the consent agenda that consists of the purchasing report and the purchasing report Excel format.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have that motion to approve by Christy and seconded by Michelle. Do I have any discussion to the motion? I just had a quick question, Larry. I noticed that we approved laptop purchase. It was almost $900,000. Have those laptops arrived? Or does that bring us current to what we need?
Yeah, I'm going to let Sam talk about that. I have some time for him to have a technology update when we talk about reopening. And I think he can
Okay.
affect that because we did actually have access to the machines that we could get sooner. And so we're grabbing those machines and we'll take some off of the later order. So I'll let him ask that when we get around to it. Thank you.
That's not specific to the motion. I'm happy to proceed. So thank you. All right, let's go ahead and vote for the consent agenda if there's no more discussion. I don't see any hands. We'll go ahead and vote, starting with you, Michelle.
Michelle Tuichpo, yes.
Mike Namalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Sally, yes.
Samuel Hanson, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right, the consent agenda is approved. Moving on to the request to speak. You received an email, board members, today with attachments on that email that had the request to speak. And those will be attached as requested to the minutes of this meeting so that they're part of the public comment and the public can see them. I think as we move forward, it would be good for us to have a conversation about how we want to proceed with public comment. It's something that we've talked about off and on through this pandemic. Well, mostly on. We seem to talk about it every time. It's something that Nate and I have chatted about, and he is working on coming up with a good solution. But we're willing to take feedback and would love to talk to the whole board about that. Christy.
Melissa, thank you for bringing that up. That was something that I also wanted to just say something about tonight. I think that we're to a point now where, we need to have some sort of forum, that we can offer to our public, for them to be able to either have an invitation, that comes in live and have that request to speak so that we can hear from our public. And I appreciate all those of you who are working on it, Sam, and you said, Nate, looking for a way for us to be able to do that, I think would be super important. I also have heard that there's several students that would also like to come, and speak to the board. And so I think that there must be a way that we can figure that out. So thank you for bringing that up. And I just want to urge all of us to make sure that we are reading those requests to speak.
Thanks, Christy. Something to work on. So thank you, and I will work on that. The superintendent, I'm going to turn the time now to you for our report section of the agenda, starting with the enrollment update.
Okay, and I'm going to turn it right over to Sam to give you that enrollment update.
Okay, let's check. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. All right, perfect. I didn't have mic problems like I did last time. So we have been processing enrollment. The State Board of Education initially last week had a requirement for us to submit a report on September 8th. However, due to the windstorm, that was pushed back to today. So we've successfully submitted a preliminary fall report to the state. They're kind of working through that to plan for the future and see what October 1 will look like. So the numbers that I'm going to present are really unofficial. They're very fluid right now. There's a lot of change going on, enrollment, unenrollment. We're just kind of at the top level. So when we, as of this morning, when I finished our report, we have in Salt Lake District, we had 20,994 students enrolled. That does not include pre-K. That is K through 12. Okay, and that does not include students who are foreign exchange or anything like that, that falls under the state reporting rules. Last year at October 1, our number was 22,018. So just slightly over 1,000 student drop. What I've looked at as I've looked at the enrollment numbers over the last 3 or 4 years, we have been in declining enrollment anyway. Each year we've had a drop about between 400 and 600 students each year. So a drop of 1,000 students is a little bit more than we normally would have, but not too far off of what we have been experiencing over the last few years anyway. With the 3 charter schools, when we report many of our numbers, we also include those 3 charter schools, and that's why I wanted to break it out. So Salt Lake District was 20,994, and our charter schools have 947 students for a grand total of 21,941. A couple of items of note is that decline that the 1,000 student decline is all at the elementary level. Middle schools have remained essentially the same from last year, and high schools have a slight increase. About 200 students so far, again, unofficially. Kindergarten, for example, last year we had almost 1,600 kindergarten students. Currently, we're reporting 1,320. And that is pretty consistent, about a 150 to 200 student decrease in each of those grade levels in the elementary. When we looked at what we projected for last year, one of the questions that we had was, are we overstaffed for this year? Now, staffing works off of ADM, average daily membership, not necessarily a physical student body count. So it's the average enrollment. But when we're reporting in September, the average enrollment is the student body count. So last year, for Salt Lake District, we projected that we would have an enrollment of 21,809. And that was consistent with the decrease that we've had over the few years. So we are a little bit lower starting off the year than we had projected. Again, that will work itself out over time a little bit. We'll be able to see what our actual average daily membership will look like as we continue through the school year. Significant jumps in students as far as at the high school level. All of our projected numbers were pretty close. We actually projected West High higher than they are. East High we projected a little lower, and Highland we projected slightly lower as well. Innovations has a little bit of a decrease in their enrollment, and we're still working through some of the special program reports, getting those coded in the student information system, so I have exact numbers on ELP, CNA, and everything. Any questions on those enrollment reports? Any grade levels or?
Go ahead, Christy.
Sam, thanks so much for the information that you've given us. I just want to make sure that I've heard you right, because I was quickly jotting down what you were saying. So the 20,994, and then you included the 947 from our charter schools gives us a total of 941. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then the number from last year, 22,018, does that include the charters?
Great question. I forgot to include that. With charters last year, it was 23,029.
So let's recalculate that then. So if it was 23, what?
23,029.
So we're down, I mean, by those numbers then, so 23,029 and the 21,941. So 1,088, correct?
Yes, 1,088.
And you're saying that it's mostly from the elementary area.
All in the elementary area.
It's all in the elementary area.
Yep.
Can you pinpoint the specific areas that we're seeing, what schools have the biggest impacts?
Yeah, I could, some of those. So, Backman had a 10% change. Almost all of the schools had a 10%. Well, sorry, not almost all. About 50% of the schools had a 10% decrease or more. Okay. So Backman's down 52 students. Beacon Heights at this point is down almost 100 students.
Right.
Bonneville is down 60 students. Dilworth is down about 70 students. Emerson right now, about 50 students. Ensign's down about 20 students. Hawthorne is down Hawthorne I'll have to relook at. I didn't get a good calculation with their CNA and ELP. But
Okay.
that's kind of what we're looking at, and that's kind of the trend. Highland Park is down 80 students.
Yeah.
And so forth.
Where I'm seeing the biggest drops, it seems like, are in our east side schools.
Yep.
So that would be, in Sam's precinct, in my precinct, and in Melissa's precinct. I mean, I can see my schools, and thanks to Becky Pittum, who, helped me put this graph together and went right down what you were saying. So, again, for me, that is, the alarm bell that Melissa and I, we're talking a little bit about of worrying about our elementary students, and obviously that's clear, especially in the schools that are in my precinct, that I'm seeing quite a large drop. But again, knowing that Hillside and Highland have stayed right about, where we projected them to be, they're not much under.
Correct.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that you're comparing these numbers that are very preliminary numbers to October 1, which we wouldn't do it under any other circumstance besides
Exactly.
pandemic circumstance, right?
But I think what's really good, at least, and I appreciate you saying that, Sam Hansen, not our other Sam, but that I think we have to keep it in perspective. I think it's important for us, superintendent, to look at where those numbers are down, and to really look at why, they're down, because I'm going to guess it was probably because of choice. I know I didn't have that many families move out of my neighborhood, so obviously there was, a choice factor that was made, but it's significant. 1,000 students is definitely significant. And so I think that we have to keep that in our sights. Even though they may be holding us harmless, we still have to look at and say, will they come back? And, so I think it has to be a discussion. So yes, Sam Hansen, you're right. They're preliminary, and they may bump up, that's a possibility, by October 1. And, but we're also looking at how many kids were registered. Is that what they're basing on also? Is that correct, Sam Quantz?
So this is based upon who we have in our student information system today.
Today.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do think it's important to look at, as we're looking at the drops, though, that over the last couple of years, we have had declines of 500 to 600 students every year. So how
Right.
much of this 1,000 students is just that trend
Right.
versus the timing?
And I would agree with that. I think that if we had seen that kind of across the board instead of just so much centered into the elementary age, that it's a great question for all of us to be talking about. You're right. I think last year was around 400. You know, we've been averaging, like you said, between 4 and 6, you know, in our drops, you know, every year. But it's also, you know, something that we have to remember that we stayed flat for so long too. So there's that transitioning, but
Melissa,
First Catherine, then Mike Namelka.
But the drops are happening in the elementary. I mean, that's the fact, is that they're rolling up through the elementary. I mean, that's how they're rolling. That's how we're seeing them roll. That they're coming, that our middle schools and our high schools are seeing the same as they roll up from the elementary, because they're you know what's happening to us, and that's what's been happening, is that you know that the elementary schools are seeing the drops, and you know before our middle schools and our high schools. So they're seeing it first, and it'll roll up through. That's been the trend. So you know this is exactly what we expected to see, and that's why it seems to me it's more of an enrollment trend than a COVID trend or a trend, depending on any sort of reflection of the way we've chosen to do our schools. So that being said, you know, I mean, and that seems to be true because our high schools and our middle schools have actually gone up in enrollment. But can you tell the exact numbers for the high schools, Sam?
Yeah, so the high schools, as of this morning, East High was at 2,038. Highland was at 1920. Horizonte, 333. Innovations, 284. West High School, 2859.
But what did you? So I was expecting West to be a little lower than that because you said you predicted it to be. You had predicted it to be even higher, huh?
I projected them at 29. They've had a couple of years where they've started the school year really high and then ended out. So we tried to compensate for that.
Okay, good. So West should be fully staffed then this year, starting as a staff for 2859.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good. Well, that's nice to have the high schools a little bit more even this year. Great. Thanks.
Sam, my question is this count you gave us today is the number of students that registered with the school district, or is it the number that logged in this morning or yesterday morning?
So this number, I've got different login numbers, but these are numbers that are enrolled in our student information system in our district right now.
What is our login numbers?
So as of, I just looked at since last Monday, we have had 18,000 students log in.
Okay.
Into one of our systems.
Well,
We've got some, a few thousand that haven't logged in yet. Those could be younger grades. 9,000 we had today. We have, 11,000 plus computers connecting, 16,000 devices connecting to our internet filter.
are you able to tell how many of those non-logins come from the west side?
I could look at that. Yeah, I didn't look that deeply at them this morning, but I could do that.
Well, if you get a chance, would you let us know what that, because I got a feeling a lot of the kids on the west side are, of course, are not logging in. And it's for various reasons, but most of the reason is they don't have a computer. But anyway, look at that numbers, and if you can let us know what that is, I'd appreciate it.
Do I have other questions from board members? Superintendent? Go ahead.
I was, to Christy's question about thinking about the schools and the drops. I mean, maybe we can look at what we would have predicted by grade level. Maybe if we break it down and say, we had X number of fourth graders last year in Bonneville, for instance. In a normal year, would number represent? I mean, we might be able to actually kind of zoom in on that, and then maybe we'd get a better sense of what the effect is, why that's happening.
Yeah, it does look to me in my elementary schools, as Sam is reporting, that we're down about twice as much as we would have expected. If 400 or 500 is the average, we're down about 1,000 in our elementary schools. And so that's curious to me. I think I would like to see us look at that. Superintendent, I understand that these are preliminary numbers, but I want to continue to be paying really close attention to that.
Yeah.
Also, I think I saw Christy's hand and Sam's hand, and Sam, you haven't had a chance to ask a question, so go ahead and then we'll move to Christy.
Well, I was just going to say, those numbers, those login numbers can be a little bit misleading, I think, because we have had teachers that haven't taken roll yet, right? Because of the way that that happens.
Yeah, so this stuff. Sorry, those numbers don't have anything to do with taking attendance.
Right.
So those are students that have logged in with their username and password. So it has nothing to do with the student information system. They've taken either their email address, they've logged into Canvas, they've logged into Clever, something like that. That's a straight login.
Thank you.
Does it count the logins every time? Or it's just how many, that's the total number that have logged in?
I can look at the last time they logged in.
Okay. All right.
I just looked at the last login and based it upon the date, went back through last Monday and kind of looked at the dates.
Okay. Christy?
I always have to find my unmute button. Thanks so much. So I just kind of want to go back and push back a little bit, that I do feel like, this has a little bit to do with our restart and COVID. Because I can tell you that as long as I've lived in my neighborhood and I know my precinct, I've never seen, Beacon, Delworth, Highland Park drop by 100 students in 1 year. And so it's a concern to me. So thank you, Superintendent. I think that, making sure that we're looking at those reasons why, finding out, if we're going to be able to circle them back into our schools. I think that that's just a progressive and needed conversation that we need to have. So again, just thank you so much for the conversation tonight and for the reality check, Sam. I think that it's good for us to have this and to know where we're at. So it'll be interesting to see how things wash out by October 1st.
One other thing I think I don't know when we would be able to access this information, but it'd be interesting to see what's happening in other districts around us, to see if their student population is going up, or are there some people that are more people on the sidelines, maybe that's something we can access after October 1st, Sam.
October 1.
Yeah.
That'll be closer to the end of the month, but.
Can I ask one more question? Do those numbers reflect the SPED students that we've had in buildings over the last couple of days?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all numbers do. That's one area.
But not the login numbers, because obviously those would be, if they were in the building, they wouldn't have needed to log in.
Right, if they were using a computer, but if they were using a computer in the building, it would reflect there. But our SPED numbers are an area that we're working still to correct some errors. Mm-hmm. And so we'll have better accurate numbers on those as we get closer to October 1.
Thank you, Sam.
Go ahead, Catherine.
And we'll have the regular charts as usual, where we have the transfer ins and transfer outs. So we'll be able to tell absolutely what we're losing and who we're losing, and whether it's a decline or enrollment or transferring. So there's no reason that we should need to analyze right now without. I mean, we'll just know that when we see the numbers.
It's just good information for us to be paying attention to then, now and later. Thank you. Did I see another hand? Any other questions, board members?
No, I had my hand up, but Sam.
Sorry.
Yeah, so
Sorry, Nate. I didn't.
Doing the same thing. It's all good.
Thanks, Nate. All right. Thank you, Sam Quantz. Always Sam Hansen as well, but thank you, Sam Quantz, for providing this information. I think it's good for us to be paying really close attention to this. Shall we move to our special education update with Shelley Halverson?
Sure, you should. So I have a WebEx question for Larry. Can I share my screen, or do you have to make that possible for me to do?
Now I need Sam because I don't know how to do that. I can share, but I don't know how to allow you to.
Or I know the board members have access to the information I'm going to go over. I have a PowerPoint. It's only 5 slides long and only 2 of them have actual information on them. So I'm happy to just talk through it if that's the best thing to do right now. What do you think, Superintendent? What would you like me to do?
Sam, is there a way that I can allow, let's see here, Shelley to,
Yeah,
okay, there you go.
Right.
You're the presenter now, Shelley.
Oh, good. Oh, look at that. Okay. Hold on 1 second. All right, Microsoft, thanks for letting me know. Okay, here we go. All right. Welcome to the SPED September update. I'm excited to be here, always excited to talk about special education with anyone who's willing to listen. So thank you for having me. The first slide, I just kind of wanted to go over what went on when we did our summer services, give you an update. We had students from 25 different schools participate in our summer services this summer. Some of those students participated online. Some of them participated in person. That's kind of depended on what parents were interested in doing and felt comfortable doing. We had some students participating in locations other than their home school. We had to run summer services based on which teachers wanted to work in the summer, which parents wanted to work in the summer. And so we did consolidate and have some sort of, I guess I would call them magnet schools, where we had different schools serve as the host for students from other buildings. And so our biggest one was over at Emerson, and we served students there from Uinta, Bonneville, Dilworth, Hawthorne, Beacon Heights. I think that might be all. And then I know all our students at Highland Park that were interested in in-person received services at Whittier, along with the students from Whittier there. We did have, we learned a lot this summer. Some of the things that we learned is that students wear their masks really well. And we don't, everybody's been really worried about that, but we did not have any issues in the summer with students wearing their masks. They were completely on board for it, and that part went really well. We did learn that as you were transitioning between groups, we needed to have staff available. At the time, we were doing things like taking temperatures, and we had kids washing their hands at the beginning and then at the end, and then we were wiping everything down in between. But once a group started, if a student came late, we learned we had to have somebody there to do the temperature, to help them wash their hands and get them into their group and different things like that. So we learned that you have to have people to manage those transition times. And we also learned we just had to be really flexible. We had some parents that said they were interested in person that then wanted online, and then they kind of changed their minds halfway through. Or parents who originally said we're not coming in person, then later became interested. And so we just learned to be flexible with our grouping and be flexible with our staff, and try to be as accommodating as we could be. And we were able to get quite a bit done that way, which we were really grateful for. At the time, with the city still being in orange, we were not able at that time, with the guidelines written the way they were, to bring our essential elements students in person. So the parents that did access our summer COVID services, those students were all in our more mild moderate group of kids with disabilities. So resource or special classes like behavior support, academic support, diagnostic, things like that. Those were the students we were able to bring in the summer. we did have a lot of essential element students who continued to receive services throughout the summer remotely whenever possible. And so that we still were able to do that. We just weren't at the time able to bring them physically in. So, so that's kind of how that went. We also started doing in-person testing because, as you know, I had to stop all of our testing in its tracks with the dismissal in March. So partway through June, we were able to start doing that again. And as you can imagine, we had quite the backlog. We had about 225 students we've had to get through. We are about 80% of the way there. As of today, actually, probably more like 85% of the way there. Our only holdup now is we have a list of students we've been contacting multiple times and we've been unable to get a hold of someone to make an appointment to bring the student into the district office to be tested. So we're going to keep working on that until we get to 100%. But that has been something that has been, we've been really grateful that we were able to do that over the summer to get caught up. Those were both for child find for initial evaluations and for re-evaluations that we are required to conduct every 3 years for our students with disabilities. So we were glad we were able to get some of that done. Okay, the next thing I kind of wanted to review for everybody is just sort of what we did in order to how we worked toward getting students ready and teachers ready and families ready for special ed students coming in person this fall. So we went about that by providing some guiding documents to schools, and we did documents, and we also did some video trainings starring this face right here to kind of help give teams support in knowing how to kind of make this decision about how much and who and when and all those different kinds of things. And so these are the steps on this slide that we gave schools for making that determination. As you know, all services that we provide to students with disabilities have to come from needs that we have outlined on their IEP. So it's really important that the IEP team is really where that decision is made, which is why we don't have like a sweeping district schedule for in-person services. That also kind of accounts for there's differentiation between schools in what this looks like because the students with disabilities in each school have different needs, which then leads to different types of schedules and different types of things that are happening in different schools across the district, which is why that's like that. That's really how it should be. That's how we make sure that individual needs are being considered, which is the name of the game always in special ed. So we had teams gather data about the student. We had them look at some of our students were brought in for assessments. We had them look at data from the spring, data from summer services if they had it. We had them look at, how much progress are we concerned that a student may have lost. We then had pointed teams to the student's current IEP to look at the goals, the types of goals the students have on their IEPs. Can they be addressed remotely, or is that something you can only do in person? Does the severity of the student's disability impact their ability to access online versus and virtual supports? And does the student require supports that really necessitate being in person? So high levels of prompting, high rates of praise or behavioral programming, like what is it that the student needs in order to access faith? And so we had them look at that. The next step was to have students contact families because we needed to kind of ascertain, first of all, what is the comfort level of the family with in-person services. That varies from family to family across the district. And so if a family is not comfortable and only wants to remain online, then we start making plans for that. But we wanted to know also what were the possible barriers to their student participating in in-person services and what could we do to eliminate those. Things like transportation and things like that. The next step was to have the teams then sit down with the lists of students, who's comfortable coming in, who's not comfortable coming in, who do we feel like requires that in-person service and maybe who doesn't. And we had the teams sit down with their administrator and look at who are all the FTE that we have, what are all of the paras that we have and what are they assigned to do, and how do we organize this and arrange it so that we can meet all of the needs of the students on the caseload at that particular school. In some cases, we ask them to consider, do you move around case managers? Do you reassign who's doing what to make sure that everybody's needs are met, and also that the teachers are able to do a really good job providing that specially designed instruction, and they're not pulled in too many different directions as far as being in person and being online. So we had the teams consider all of those things. And then they were to go to the next step and communicate those plans with families. So then reach back out to families and talk about what parts of the services were going to be in person. For some students, that's every service. For some students, it's partial. So then those students are kind of in a hybrid situation already where they're receiving some content online and some special education in person. So they reached out to families, provided them with those plans, went over expectations as far as mask wearing and hand washing and things like that for when their student is in the building. And then we're in a continual cycle and lead of reviewing and reassessing if those services are meeting needs. And we've already made adjustments in several schools as things have not rolled out the way people anticipated maybe they would. And so we've already been making a lot of changes to the original plans we had for kids, because until we started, it was kind of hard to know exactly how different students would respond, based on the fact that our online environment right now is more structured than the one in the spring and more robust. And so now that we've, had 2 days of school, some plans are having to change right away and some are not. So that's kind of where we're at right now as far as those in-person services. And that's kind of how that came about and how we had teams make those plans. And then the last slide is just kind of what we've been working on professional development wise, so you kind of know what we're sharing out there. We did sit down with transportation when it was time to figure out how to have special ed kids ride the bus and masks and different things, and they were amazing. Transportation has been nothing short of amazing to work with pretty much through this entire thing. And we sat down and worked through some training they could provide to drivers. So the drivers have a protocol for how to handle if a student is not wearing their mask or is refusing to wear their mask, and how we approach that. Because as you know, in the governor's mask mandate, there is an option for an IEP or 504 exemption for wearing a mask. We are really working towards continually training kids to wear a mask. So even if they are not wearing one right now, and we provide the exemption, in the exemption, we outline a plan for helping the student get to where they can wear the mask for a longer period of time. And transportation has been great. They have a reinforcement system going on and all those kinds of things to help support kids and them in making sure that everyone is safe wearing masks on the bus. We have done a lot of Canvas specific for special education teachers. The lovely Dr. Hall gave us our own educational technology specialist from the teaching and learning department that's assigned just to special education. Her name is Gloria Shirley, and she has been completely invaluable to us this summer, providing PD in the fall, specifically in August, to our teachers about how to use Canvas based on the population they serve. And that was completely invaluable. And I heard that from lots of teachers, how helpful that was. And then she is continuing to help people kind of one-on-one when they're struggling with different things around the Canvas platform and how to engage kids the best. And so we're really grateful for that support that we've received. We're continuing to work on our new Power School special programs IEP platform and train people. We spent a lot of time talking about how to run a virtual meeting versus an in-person meeting, and things like that. Our Power School program has come out with a form we can use, like an electronic signature. So we've been training teachers on using that. A really big deal for us and a big push this year is better professional development around parent participation in the special education process and making sure parents are able to give their input as they're supposed to be able to do by law. And we really want that because that's the best end for students is when the school and parents plan together how best to meet that individual student's needs. So we've done a lot of training for teachers and administrators on how to guarantee and follow up and make sure parents feel heard in that process and that their needs are being met as well. And then we've also done some professional development, and we're continuing on writing IEPs during the 2020-2021 school year. We have, what's the word for it? Rolled out is the word I'm going to use, a COVID addendum that is specific to the circumstances we're in this year, so that when we sit down at an IEP meeting, we're going to cover with every parent basically all three possible scenarios for their students. So all online, some sort of hybrid situation where they're getting some in person and some virtual, and then also, you know, if we were able to all go back to school full time, so that we're talking about that student's IEP in all three circumstances, because we want that to be really transparent and fluid for parents, so that if, you know, if we get into a situation where a group has to be quarantined for 2 weeks, they already know what those online only services would look like before that even happens. So we've already had the conversation about what would need to look different and what would need to look the same. And same for if we were to move into the whole student body of a school coming back into the building, what does that IEP look like versus the one where the student is in a little bit with a foot in both worlds, because the student needs may change based on their disability and that environment. We're trying to be super open and transparent about that up front. And so we have worked with teachers extensively on how to have those conversations and how to look at that situation fluidly like that, so we can be super clear with them. And that is all I have. So now I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm ready for any and all questions.
Questions from board members?
I got one.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. I thought you were just giving me a thumbs up.
No, I was giving you two questions, Shelley. Have we
Okay.
lost any, is our population maintained pretty good?
Special ed population is going down significantly. So we have low levels of enrollment right now in special ed. And so we're working on finding out why. And we've also had some glitches in the system. So when Sam talked about us working on that right now, we're having teachers give us their information for the caseload if they have in front of them, so we can go through and make sure we've got everything being reported right in the system so that we can get an accurate count of kids. But I do know that our enrollment for special ed, it has gone down more than some other groups.
Second question. Have the three hub schools been given their extra FTE?
They have, and they have all made plans to use it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Christy.
Shelley, thank you. As always, the information that you bring to us is so informative and very much appreciated. So thank you for that wonderful report. I have a couple of questions for you. When you talked about parent participation, I love that you're looking at that, and hopefully that will bring in some more information about why the population is going down. But as parents are in the system right now, who do parents reach out to if you feel like there are things that aren't quite coming together, you know, for them, you know, through services? Is there a specific person at the school, or do they reach back out to the district? What's the pathway for that?
That's a really good question. We like to start at the lowest level, like anybody. So if they're struggling with something, or they're in a meeting and they don't understand something, or something comes up later, we ask them to talk to the teacher first, right? And find out, say, I don't understand why this happened or something like that. And if the teacher or if the issue is with the teacher, then we ask them to reach out to the school principal and kind of clarify what's going on, ask questions about what's going on. Because situations different in different schools, if people reach out directly to me, which is fine, I have to go do a bunch of sleuthing first, which I'm happy to do. But one of the questions I do ask parents is like, is the school aware that you're frustrated? Does the school know that you feel this way? Because if they don't, then that is something that we want to address right away. But, if they've tried that or a parent feels uncomfortable, we encourage them to email the department and we will rally and figure out what's going on. I also really like it when parents are able to get Amy Wyrick from the Utah Parent Center involved. We talk all the time, Amy and I, and she can bring concerns to me as well. And sometimes that's nice for parents because she's a special ed parent in our district too and has sat in their shoes across that table. So I always encourage them to reach out to her. So we start with the school, but if that is too much and it's not getting anywhere, then we encourage them to contact us and we can help everybody sit down and work through those issues.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the next question that has come up is, so our school day, what's the expectation for our SPED kids that are online? Should their the number of instruction hours be the same as Gen Ed? Is that different? Can you talk a little bit about that expectation?
I can talk about that expectation. It's a good one. It should be the same. Kids should be receiving the same amount of instruction as their Gen Ed peers. Some of them might be receiving all of it in special education if that's what their IEP dictates. But most students in special ed are participating in their Gen Ed class as well. So some of those, that 5.5 hours or whatever the school day will be in person with their special ed teacher or online with their special ed teacher, and then it will also be in the Gen Ed environment online. But the expectation would be that they have a school day just like everyone else's school day.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful information that I can, because I've had that question asked and I thought that I knew, but now I do know. So thank you so much. Then my last one is that I know that as a board, we passed the resolution for inclusiveness. Are you feeling like, that there's challenges or roadblocks, or how are you feeling about, the resolution that we put forward with that?
Well, I mean, the resolution is like my favorite thing ever because it shows the district and the board's commitment to our kids, our students with disabilities and their inclusion in the general population. And so I am super thrilled about that and love having your support. We so appreciate that. It's kind of hard right now, right? Like, I feel like the biggest stumbling block we have right now is a worldwide pandemic on so many levels because some of the headway we were making into the inclusion has gotten kind of funky. We do have a lot of really great inclusive attempts that are happening online, I guess. For some students that works better than others. So that's been the hardest thing is I have had parents ask me, well, when they're at the school, will there be Gen Ed peers there? And the answer is, well, no, there won't be. So, and we can't really replicate that exactly. So we do have a lot of teachers pushing in or co-teaching some of our Gen Ed subjects online so that they are in the virtual classroom when their special ed students are there and can support them as much as they can. So it looks a little bit different, but we're still making it work and we're still making it happen. And our inclusion specialists have put together a lot of training on how to do inclusion in the virtual environment. And there's been some good national stuff out there about doing that. So basically, a lot of it is the same, right? They're on the class list and they're participating. It's just a little bit trickier to support sometimes. But as far as like other types of roadblocks, I wouldn't say we're necessarily running into those yet. When we're all back together in person, then we'll kind of see where we're at with the resolution and where we need to go next, as far as making sure we're making strides forward always in that area. But that'll be something we kind of have to assess. It got passed and then everything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know that I'm going to do a bad job of it, but I remember a couple of weeks ago, Catherine brought up, just how important it is that we stay in the loop with you, and especially around, our special ed kids, and make sure that, we know what's going on. And if there's anything that we can do to help support, we're here to do that. So thank you again for the great report tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Christy.
Other questions? Thank you, Shelley. I think what we've done is asked you to, probably the superintendent has shared with you that we've asked for regular updates, probably not monthly, but a couple of times a year, so that we keep in the loop about all things that you're working on with special ed. And thank you for the work you're doing, especially the work for including parents in the conversation. And I know this is a tricky time, but thank you for the report. Superintendent, did you have some comments to make?
No, just thank you, Shelley. And, I've worked with Shelley over the years, and, we've talked about inclusion a lot, and she's doing a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Superintendent.
Okay. So for our opening update, we opened, and that was very, very exciting. So happy to finally start. And I really just kind of want to start by saying thank you to all the teachers and administrators and support staff that work so hard to prepare for the opening of school, especially in this odd environment and strange way to begin. I'm just going to share a few brief experiences that I had on that day. I started out over at Bryant in board member Hanson's younger sister's first day as a math teacher. And she was online with her students when I went in, and I had a chance to talk to her for a minute, chance to talk to the kids. And it was just fantastic because I've known her for a long time. She was a student at a school that I was an administrator at, and it was just super exciting to see Hannah at work as a math teacher. That'll be a great thing for our district for a long time to come. I left there and I went up to Ensign, and I was lucky enough to get up there just in time for morning announcements. And so I got online with Mr. Jacobson. We did morning announcements. We went through a mindfulness activity that I got to say I really enjoyed. That was super nice. So it was nice to start the morning up at Ensign. From there, I went over to Backman, and just kind of inspired by the groups of teachers and their focus on working together. And I think it was a really good example of the strength of effective teaming. The people were all working together, planning together, teaching together. Ran into another former student in her first year of teaching, Rebecca Anguiano, as a second grade teacher that was a former student. And so that was awesome. I heard didn't have a chance to get up to East High, but heard some really nice things about how the student government was gathering information, getting some positive feedback on the first day, and then talking about ways to create community among the student population. I thought that was just fantastic. Of course, we had successes and struggles. It was a first day of school, and different than many of our first days of school. First days of school tend to have successes and struggles, and these, I think, were certainly magnified by the pandemic and the recent weather events. We still did have some schools that were without power. Emerson was without power on the first day. We relocated the teachers that were teaching from school to Uinta, and there were a few students that were attending in person at Emerson that we relocated to Beacon Heights, and so that worked well. But now Emerson is back up and running with power, so we're really happy about that. It was different kinds of problems. Obviously, I mean, normal first day. I don't know where I don't have my schedule. I don't know where my classroom is. I can't get my locker open. It was a completely, obviously a completely different category of stuff. There were some struggles here and there with technology, of course. And that, the kinds of struggles that even if we were in person in a classroom goes down to the library the first day, there's login things and issues that we deal with. But I think people really did a nice job of rolling with it and doing a really good job. I did share an email with the board earlier that I just didn't have until this afternoon, and it was an unfiltered. I asked administrators yesterday afternoon for feedback, both successes and struggles, and so I sent that to you this afternoon. Hope you got a chance to look at that. And I would certainly, I encourage any parents out there that had any specific issues. Like Shelley said, it's best if we start at the I don't know. I don't want to say the lowest level. It's best if we start at the level closest to where the problem is. So if there's a problem with a specific teacher, if parents will reach out to that teacher, and if they're not successful in reaching out to that teacher, then certainly reach out to the administration at the school, and we will do the best we can to navigate any sort of problems that folks are having. So we're started. That's what I have in terms of the initial part of the reopening update. But I wanted to talk for just a moment about the metrics that we set up for return. And we did this back on September 30th, and we set our metrics as a 5% positivity rate in Salt Lake County and 10 new cases per day per 100,000. And, we originally set those metrics as we talked about them in cabinet. Our effort was to use science and to try to find some scientific way to guide our decisions. Currently, the positivity rate over the last 7 days, so that's how we called it out, was the last 7-day average. The current positivity rate is 10.82 in Salt Lake County right now over the last 7 days. And it was 9.88 at the time that we made the decision to go with these metrics. And the current new daily cases per 100,000 is 14.7 in Salt Lake County right now. It's been as low as 11. We've gotten really close to meeting the metric in that area, but we've had a little bit of a turn in the other direction. I think at this point, I mean, if we're perfectly honest, it's just not reasonable to believe that those criteria will be met in this first grading period. I know we're coming up on that time. And, as we've learned, so well from the virus that, things are constantly changing and we need to stay aware of that. I had a conversation today with Salt Lake County Health Department, and we're setting up a group of district leadership and folks from the health department, some of their scientists, to meet next week. And the purpose of that meeting would be to evaluate the data that we're using, because we knew we would be able to access some other data when other schools started and some of these things. And so it's to take a look at the data that we're using. And so, while we do want to be back in school, I guess I want to be clear about one piece of that is, the purpose of that meeting, it's not we're not re-examining the metrics so that we can go back to school sooner. We're re-examining them to determine if they're the best data available to guide our decisions. And so, we'll have an open conversation with them and get some feedback, and then we will wrap back around with you to let you know the results of that. But like I said, there may be information from surrounding districts. We're going to look at other numbers that are specific to Salt Lake City, and whatever other information that they have. The executive director was having his team gather information specific to Salt Lake City that we can look at. The only other thing I wanted to say is, relative to all that, we're taking a pause on the survey. So we had a survey we were going to send out that was going to ask the question of, if we go back in hybrid, would you choose to go back in hybrid, or would you choose to be all online? And right now, where we have the metrics that we chose back on the 30th of July, it would be a false question to ask that, because we won't make that metric. And so we want to just put that on hold for just a minute, and then we can come back and revisit that after we have our meeting with the health department. But to send that out now would imply that that was a question where that choice would be available, and I don't think we can say that for sure. Those are the things that I had to talk about. I was going to ask Sam Quantz to maybe just give an update on technology, and then after that, if folks have questions, I do have the cabinets here and school leadership and support, Brian, Chris, and Beck here to take questions. Sam, do you want to give a quick update on technology and where we are with our distribution and so forth?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we are making great progress. We're not perfect by any means, and we still have a little ways to go, but up to date, what we have recorded is given out. We've given out 12,223 devices in the district. We have another 1,000 devices that have started trickling in from our suppliers starting Friday, today, and tomorrow. With the devices that we've had in district, we've been able to meet most of the requests of our elementary schools and middle schools. We still have a few outstanding requests from those schools. And we still don't have a lot of devices for if somebody shows up new and needs a device. We're still kind of short in that area. However, the 1,000 devices that we have that are coming in between today and tomorrow, those are immediately being shipped out to the high schools. Those were the areas with the greatest need and the largest number of need. So that will fill their immediate requests that we received from the principals. Then we have another 2,000 devices coming in. They're set to ship on September 30th. We learned just a week ago that our 6,000 devices were delayed again because of a back order in the trackpads on your computer. So apparently that is now an issue. So we pivoted with those, and we've talked to a couple of our vendors and found another one that is able to get us about 1,500 devices in a couple of weeks. So that's the question you had, Board Member Ford, President Ford, about those orders. These are all orders as we're shifting funds from previous orders to try and get them in faster. So as we receive these 1477, we're going to cancel 1477 off of one of our other orders, just to keep those funds the same without having to spend much more. So within the next couple of weeks, I anticipate we're going to have about 3,500 more devices, and then in a few weeks after that, we should have another 2,500 coming in.
Can you tell me numbers? How short are we? How many requests have we not been able to meet, and how many students might not be able to access based on that?
So based upon the request that the principals have given me, I have a request for 70 computers from Northwest. I have 500 from West. I have 300 from East and 100 from Highland. Highland received 100 devices today. East received 100 devices today, and between yesterday and today, West received almost 180 devices.
So those would then be subtracted from what they've requested.
Correct.
Yeah.
We know. I mean, the real issue here is working towards a one-to-one. We're just meeting the basic need that we have. And as we use this as a springboard to really talk about a platform that will help our students get on computers regularly without having to rob Peter to pay Paul, this will help us get there. But once we get these devices, this 1,000 computers over the next couple of days, that will really take the edge off. And then as we receive the additional ones, that'll help us have a little more flexibility in what we're doing. It'll help us replace devices that get broken, because some will get broken at home. And we're trying to manage all of that.
I have a question, Sam.
Okay.
How many devices are being requested from the West Side schools, elementaries?
Oh, almost all of them. A total, I don't have that off the top of my head, but we've filled most of those. I think you're muted, Mr. Namelka.
Oh, there we go. Oh, now I'm unmuted. They have enough devices for every student.
They do not have devices for one-to-one. No, they don't. None of our schools do. But they have enough devices for the students that have said they need a device. Now, that's still a far cry from making sure we provide a device for every student. We still have a long ways to go to get there. And that's a broader conversation more than just devices.
I understand.
Other questions? Christy? Oh, and Dottie, Christy, and then you.
Oh, thank you. So I was wondering, I know it's probably too early right now because it's only the second day of school, but by maybe in 1 or 2 weeks, could you have the number of the students who actually logged in to Canvas compared to the number of students that are registered in high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools?
Yeah, that is something that we can run. I wasn't able to run that today, but we did look at the number of logins to the system. So if somebody logs into Canvas, that counts as a login. If somebody logs into Clever or to Office 365, that counts as a login, or to their computer.
Okay, awesome. That would be great. And then my other question is, have there been any other requests for hotspots given that a lot of students had their power knocked out because of the windstorm, or do more students need access to Wi-Fi?
Great, that is a great question. That's the one I forgot to cover. So hotspots, we ran out of really quickly. We had the 600 initially. We ordered another 200 that came in last week, and those have been being distributed. We're seeming to meet the need across the board on the hotspots. Again, we have a grant submitted with the state to purchase another 800 hotspots to just provide as much flexibility with internet access. The foundation is working with Comcast, and they have started taking requests to help Comcast sponsorships, and those are rolling in. In addition, we've talked to principals about identifying or buildings or apartments where we can stick some of these mobile hotspots that we have. A lot of times you've maybe heard about them being put on buses.
Mm-hmm.
We tried that out at the end of last year, and it didn't work very well. The range of a Wi-Fi access point is a little bit limited, and so when you add the walls of a bus and the walls of the home, that weakens the signal. So what we're looking at doing is putting those inside apartment complexes where we have concentration of students, and helping provide access to those. Those will be going out in the next few days.
Okay, that sounds really good. And I have one final question. So I know that West High specifically had put in 500 requests, as you said, for a device, and a lot of those requests have been fulfilled, around 180, right? So for the students that have not received a device yet and are waiting for the devices to come, is there anything that we're able to do for them to help catch up with school in between those time periods?
So that's a great, probably teaching and learning question more than an IT question. But I know that Dr. Hall is working on all sorts of opportunities with the teachers for students to make up work and provide lots of flexibility for learning. For example, in our learner enrollment validation plan, if a student can't complete an assignment on the day, they can still have up to 10 days to complete that in order to receive that attendance mark.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with all sorts of flexible ideas like that to provide as much opportunity for students.
Okay, yeah, great. I just had my first 2 days of school, and the teachers are working really, really hard, and so I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
Thanks, Dottie. Go ahead, Christy.
So Dottie, thanks so much because you asked several of my questions, which is so great. I love it. Thinking about the same thing. I think one of the hard questions that we need to ask, and I appreciate that Dati started to do that, but it really is to talk about what's the action steps for those kids that don't have a computer or don't have connectivity. And I think that for us to say, and I so appreciate the work that Sam's doing to try and get those computers in, but being short that many. And like you said, the requests that we have, this is what we know about. But I also know that there's also families that thought, no, we should be able to get along with this, and then have realized that they can't. And so trying to figure out how to get that information to them. But Superintendent, I think it's important at this point for us to talk about what are we going to do about this? And as I'm thinking about it, as Dati has brought up, what are some of the options for our kids? Nate and I talked a little bit about, can kids go to libraries? Are there hotspot areas where they can go? Can we social distance in the commons and in the the auditoriums at schools? And I know that's not, the optimal idea, because we're trying to obviously keep kids safe. But I think that it's really difficult knowing that there are that many kids that don't have computers, don't have connectivity, and we decided to go into remote. And so I think, like, what's our next steps? What's our action plans between, the shipments of these computers and the hotspots? And I think it's difficult for families right now to say, okay, and I appreciate that Tiffany and Sam are looking at, well, you have a 10-day window, but yet that's really hard to say that, to families right now. So I would just love, for us as a board and with your administration and with the cabinet to talk about this, and say, all right, what are we going to do? What's our next steps? Because we can't wait, right now for those literally hundreds of kids that don't have a computer.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we have a cabinet meeting tomorrow, and we can talk about that very issue. I don't know if anybody from school leadership has any input on what people have been doing at the schools.
Go ahead, Catherine.
So I thanks to Dottie too, because those were the questions that I had written down. Many of her questions were the questions that I had written down. And the questions that I wanted to ask also were to ask Superintendent Madden to ask the principals what students are doing, because I think they probably have a good idea about how they're covering it. I do know that there are some families that have devices, and I do not like the idea of students not being able to be synchronous, but I know that there's some families that are using devices one-to-one, and I also know that there's some families that are using their own devices, but there are some students that don't have devices, but I know that there are some families at West that have their own devices that are also hoping to get school devices for various reasons. So I've heard of that situation, that they would prefer to have a school device, but right now they're using their own device. I do know that there are some students that don't have devices as well. So I think there are a range of situations that are happening right now. And I'd like to hear from the principals about that, about what kind of situations they're seeing.
Yeah, I can push that question out in the morning, and we'll have answers from them. I will have feedback for our cabinet meeting in the afternoon.
That'd be great.
Do you think I could just ask the question to school support, maybe, with them being so closely tied into our schools right now, maybe Brian, Becky, or Chris might have some ideas, since they are the ones who have been talking to the principals.
So I can speak just from conversations I've had the last 2 days with 5 or 6 schools. And I think, Catherine, you bring up something that's really important, that it's going to be a little different for each family and probably different for each student. One of the things that I've talked to each of our administrators about in those 5 schools was teachers actually reaching out to families directly, either through a phone call, through a distance home visit, whatever that might look like, to really plan for that student just what they can do to one, either keep up with the work that's currently going on in the classroom, or 2, what they can do once they are connected to their teachers again. So I know that it is on the minds of the administrators in the schools, and that they are actively working both with their counselors, their counseling staff, I should say, and their teachers to reach out to families and really strategize about what's going to work best for each of them. And I like the idea of being able to maybe create some spaces where students can come in and possibly work in the school. I think in small groups, we've seen that we can pull that off with our special ed students in particular. So I think it is something that we could do with our non-connected students as well. The other thing that schools are very intent on right now is keeping track of the students that are and are not connected. So I think they've done a great job knowing who those kids are. Now it's just a question of, okay, we know who they are. What are we going to do to support them? But do know that that is happening out there. And we'll certainly bring it up on Thursday when we meet with all of our administrators as well. We'll spend some time strategizing about how to best go about supporting those kids, making sure they don't get lost.
Go ahead, Brian, and then Mike Nemelka had a question, and then I see Sam Hansen's hand.
Okay, anecdotally, in talking to the 10 elementary school principals that I have, don't have the numbers that Sam has, but based on what the feedback they've gotten from their teachers, 7 of the 10 elementary schools in the network that I have is we're 85% of the students had been online, part of synchronous learning, 85% or more in those schools. So it makes it so when you have a school of 400 students, say, finding 40 to 60 to 80 students is a whole lot easier than there's still challenges to it, and why they're connecting or not connecting can be a challenge. But there's it's not a overwhelming number in the majority of the schools that have given me. We're only 2 days into this, so we'll certainly be able to know and hear and see more a week or two from now. At the secondary level, the only the high school information that I've gotten is that they're not only doing daily pickups for devices, things like that. There's the high schools are still going to homes to get kids devices. So they're delivering those to the doorsteps of homes as well, still right now.
I think we had Mike Nemelka, then Sam Hansen, but I see your hand, Becky. Do you want to finish that conversation before we move to the next comment? You're muted, Becky.
Now I can. I just wanted to piggyback on what Chris and Brian have said, is that one of the things all of our schools are doing is really putting an emphasis on finding individuals. So for example, in some of our schools, they have second period where those teachers are responsible for really making sure they know where every one of those kids is, what their connectivity is, and then helping make sure they get the resources that they need as quickly as we can get them to them. So that is one thing that we are doing across the board, is trying to really make sure we have those individuals identified. And then some of the things, like Brian said, we have principals driving to homes and taking devices to homes. We also have the foundation has been working with Comcast, and we have families, all they need to do is sign up now with our foundation, and they will connect them with Comcast, for internet services. I also wanted to say that we had a meeting this morning with Mayor Mendenhall at Hillside's SCC, and she mentioned that they're working with Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to have a Rose Park Stake Center be open during the day with people there to help students, so that there'd be connectivity there. And I don't know where they're at in that process, but I know they're working on it and working on, and Christy, you may want to say more about this later, but working on 2 mobile hotspots that will improve connectivity, and it will be free across projected across the valley, certain parts of the valley that would impact our students' connectivity greatly. So it's a great opportunity for us to continue to work with the city. So all said and done, the other part is that Sam has absolutely been a hero. I just want to call that out again. I don't know, he never sleeps. I don't know that he sleeps or eats or does anything other than technology right now. And we are so grateful to him, because I know in my schools, I can call him and say, Highland Park, like for example, they need 3 computers, and I know he'll help me with it and do everything he can to get those over to them if we can find them. And it's amazing the numbers of computers we've been able to find. Thanks.
Thanks, Becky. Go ahead, Mike. Did you have a comment or question?
Negativo.
Okay, Sam Hansen.
I think you sort of answered my question. I mean, I was just gonna say that I've heard from SCCs and from principals that, you know, we are addressing these things as quickly as we can, and I don't want to minimize the problem at all either, but
Full of shit. It's coming over.
I do think that we just, you know, of course, should make sure that we're getting devices to kids that have no device in the home at all before we get an extra device to anybody that, you know, is, and not that sharing a device isn't a exigent need to, but, you know, of course, we need to make sure we get them to kids that have none at all first. And it sounds like that's what's happening. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I'd like to just take an opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I really am alarmed at how many students aren't able to access. And I really appreciate, the superintendent, that you will meet with your cabinet and discuss that tomorrow, because we need a plan. We can't leave kids behind. The virus is serious. It's real. I don't want to minimize that, but our job is education and reaching out to our kids. I appreciate the efforts that you're making, but it has to be successful, right? We have to balance the risk of the virus with the risk of losing students. And school has started. And so I do think it's really important that we reach out and ask our parents how it's going for them. I think that would be useful information. I think that they'll have lots of things to tell us that'll be of import. When we set metrics in July, the city was in orange. And I think using science and metrics is important, but I appreciate, superintendent, that you're willing to look at, are those the right metrics? Because everybody has told me, without exception, that the goal needs to be to get our kids back into the buildings as quickly as we can do so safely. That's where we can be the most effective educators. If that's incorrect, tell me that. But everybody is telling me urgently we need to get our kids back into the building. And I think we need to figure out how to do it. I think we can look, as you've said, to other school districts. They're doing it. We can see that cases are going up, so we need to be paying attention to how that's working. I think guidance from the county health director, I appreciate that you're meeting with him. I think he's been cautious, but I think supportive as well. And so listening to that guidance. I also would like you just to know, let's see. So I want to kind of know what our employees are thinking about how their students are accessing. And then I just want attendance data. I want to know how many kids are able to access the education. I want to make sure that the overwhelming experience that you're hearing is not what I'm hearing, because it isn't great right now. And I don't think we're serving our children as well as we should be and could be. And neighboring districts are trying it. I think it behooves us to try it. I don't want to do it, like I said, unsafely, but I think we need to look at, can we do it safely as quickly as we can? And I think that there is good evidence that we can do it safely now. And so I want us to be looking at that really carefully, because it's important that we do that. It's important that we get our kids the access that they need. And I do not want to minimize the effort that I see everybody going to, but it isn't, if we're not accessing all the kids, we're not getting them. And that is really scary to me. Sam and I have talked about this. I think we both have things that we're afraid of. And and the virus is very scary. I'm afraid of that too. But I am more afraid of kids that are not going to graduate from high school, or kindergartners that are not going to have a positive experience with education. I think it's easy to say, well, when this virus goes away in a few years or a year, or we have a vaccine, that we can catch kids up. But I'm really worried that there are certain kids that we will not ever catch, and gaps will get bigger. It will be hard. And I think that needs to be the urgency that we feel, is reaching out to those children, really to all children, but making sure everybody has that way of connecting, that we can, I think we can do it safely. I think we should be looking at that. So that's my 2 cents. I really would like to find out how parents are feeling about how the start of school went.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question. So are you asking us to survey parents, survey employees, and then provide attendance data? I just want to make sure I heard.
So I'm suggesting that, but I'm one board member. So I kind of want to know what other board members think and feel about that. I don't want to create work for you unnecessarily, but I do hope to share the sense of urgency I feel in meeting the needs of my district, my precinct, where there's a lot of concern, and then so many people have reached out to me concerned about the experience they're having or not having, and I just want to make sure that we're really sensitive to that view as well. Christy, and then Sam.
So to piggyback a little bit onto what Melissa has said, but what I want to do is I really want to start out with my comments on a positive note, and that, I appreciated getting the letters that I've gotten, whether it was from Catherine today or from Becky Pittum, because I think it's important that we do see those success stories, that are happening in our schools. There's definitely some of our parents that have been able to log on and be able to have a good experience with, even in the last couple of days. And on the other hand, we know that, as you've already pointed out, Superintendent, it's been a rocky road, right? I mean, we know that there's been a lot of things that haven't gone well. And I think that Sam Quantz, you've talked about, being able to provide that information that Melissa was talking about, as far as attendance goes, we'll be able to look at the numbers of connectivity, how kids are logging on. And I also appreciate, Brian and Becky and Chris talking about that they really are out there looking for kids that aren't connecting. So we know that big scope, is happening. But I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is that this is new for us. And, Superintendent, I think you've heard all of us say that. You've said it, the cabinet has said it. This is new for us. And I feel like one of our best resources that we have is not only everyone who's on this screen tonight, but our parents and our students. Dottie talked a little bit about, having that student voice, at the table with the high school committee, that Roberto's putting together. And when we think about the long history that we have of shared governance and how important it is to have those voices at the table, why not pioneer that way? With some of the issues and some of the challenges that we are having right now, to bring together those stakeholder groups, because I want to know what's going on over at West High, or up at Ensign, or down over at Benyon, or over at Emerson, not just what's going on in Precinct 7, with the Highland feeders. I want to know what's happening. And I think that it does seem overwhelming to try and figure out, do we do it, chop up the city in different quadrants and put those stakeholder groups together. But I don't think that would be a bad thing for us to do. I think that we need to build some trust with our community. We need to provide good information to them. And for me, that's what shared governance is all about, is building that trust and that conversation and listening to, what the issues are. I think that for me personally, what I've been hearing from my parents is they're just biting at the bit to want to be involved. That's it. They just want to be involved. They just want to be able to sit around the table, be able to talk with you or to listen to Brian, or, I know that Brian and Becky and some parents sat down at Highland a week or so ago and had a good conversation about some of the issues that they were seeing. And I think, why not do that, Superintendent? Let's look at, pulling together. For me, the survey is not as important as bringing those stakeholder, groups together. I think we would garner more from that, and just say, this is fluid, this is new, here's an idea that was given to us, whether it was about the middle school schedule, but let's get together and say, is it really going to work? How's that going to look? How can we talk about it? And I think we need to broaden our base. And so I would ask, that as this board, that we really do get behind that idea again of shared governance, that we saw it work really well in multiple ways when we reach out to the community and we involve them in these conversations. And I think that, we might see some angry ones. We know there's some happy ones. We know that there's some middle ground ones, but they just want to be involved. That's what this is about. So I would just ask, that we really consider that. The last thing I wanted, Superintendent, would you mind touching on the 4 days that of what are some of the options, that we can look at, of where we're going to put those 4 days, in our calendar. And then also, I heard you talk about, which I think is fabulous, a group, a team that you're going to put together to meet with the county health. Could you also talk about who's going to be on that team and what that looks like? I think that would be really helpful, to know who's going to be at the table advocating and looking at those metrics with the county health department. So first, maybe the 4 days, if you have some ideas, and then who's on the team.
Yeah. So on the 4 days, we know we have to use the snow makeup day, June 6th. And then in terms of the other 3 days, we don't have a decision on that yet. But the options, what you asked for was options, are tacking them on the 3 days after the 6th of June would be an option. There's also a possibility, because we do have a plan for weather events, the snow day, that there could be a possible waiver, but we don't need to do anything with that right this minute, because we can go through winter a little ways and see where we are. I mean, if we have a snow event this year that causes another cancellation in school, then we can address that all at once. So there are, those are a couple of options that we have. Then to your other question, and I was going to talk about this Cabinet's all here. I was going to talk to them about this tomorrow. I just talked to the executive director of the health department today, and that's who I was going to ask to be there representing the district in that meeting. And then we can, and then I think you raised a very good point too about, shared governance. And so let us meet with the health department. Let's get some feedback. And I'm just hoping, what I hope for is an honest conversation, so that we can make intelligent decisions. But we can share that information out to schools through SCCs and SICs as well. Once we have that, and then maybe we can draw some feedback from them.
Thank you, Superintendent. I saw Sam's hand. Christy, were you not finished? Sorry.
I just wanted to follow up on what he said. Are there also non-student days is an option too, instead of at the end of the school year?
We had 9 days at the start, and we had those 3 non-student days that we used to cover those.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've already used those for student learning.
Moselle could maybe speak to if there's another option, but those are the 2 that I know that we've talked about.
So, that about sums it up as far as what we could do. And short of talking about then utilizing days that are set aside as non-contract days, not only non-student but non-contract, And that would jam us into things like Thanksgiving break, winter break, spring break, and that sort of thing. And so, other than that, whether or not there's a weather event this year is what we're kind of waiting on before we even consider approaching the state with a waiver question. So that's really where we're at. We the the expansiveness of a calendar. People are always surprised when I do the math with them about how few days really there are to play with. So we're just waiting to, see if we're going to have to add yet another day to request a waiver, and then what our other options are would be at the end of the year or cutting into a holiday breaks, which are not favorable ever.
Well, and crazy that we've already had a weather event, right? It's a crazy world. Sam, go ahead. Sorry, and thank you for being patient.
You're welcome. Christy said most of what I wanted to say, which was just that I've heard people ask for opportunities to give input and to help out in whatever way they can, because I think we all recognize that these are just an amazing set of disasters piled one on top of the other. I guess I would say that I've heard from several people that want to know what we're going to do about those missing days, and I would say my personal view is that we don't need to have a long board discussion about it. It sounds like we'd have that day at the end of the year and the 3 non-student days that we can use. But maybe we should just make a formal have a formal discussion and vote on that at the next possible opportunity so that we're clear.
I think that's a good idea, Sam. So we can talk about that.
I was also just go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead and finish, Sam. Go ahead. You've been patient. Go ahead.
I feel like the thing that we didn't, or at least that I didn't think about, you think about like all the categories of risk and vulnerability that we talk about a lot in education, and the one sort of new thing that I hadn't thought about that makes it harder to do this kind of remote learning is just if you have more than 2 or 3 kids, it gets really difficult. And I've heard from a lot of those families concerns about like lunches that are staggered across different schools and things like that, and some issues with having kids that have to go, for example, a kid that's at Hawthorne that maybe is supposed to pick up their lunch at Liberty and just not really having enough time to get from point A to point B. But I feel like, again, those are all things that we can work on, and we all know who to talk to about those issues, and those things will get better in the next few weeks. So to just maybe not jump into a survey immediately, until we get our feet underneath us would be my 2 cents on that question. I mean, I'm, totally open to doing something like that. I just think we might need a little time to think about what we want to ask and what, I'm not sure we know what all the questions are yet. So
right. Thanks, Sam. Dottie.
Yeah, I just wanted to really reiterate what President Ford said. I think every point she made is exactly what we need to be listening to right now. I'm very grateful for all the people on the board and at this meeting, and all the people who are working so hard to get all the students the devices they need. But I think we also need to remember that one student left behind is a failure for all of us. I know there are varying degrees of familiar situations and not having a one-to-one ratio, but we also need to appreciate how difficult it is for a student to come up with the scheduling to go with their siblings, to watch their siblings. And as Sam said, 2 or 3 kids makes it very, very difficult to run school at home. And on board member Christie's comment on shared governance, students are the largest stakeholders in education. And this might be a crazy idea, but maybe having a youth town hall where students can come and just say their concerns. I know it'll be long and it'll be chaotic, but I think the most important thing is that every person here who's part of the district be heard. And so I think those are just points that I'd like to make. So thank you.
Thank you, Dati. One thing I'd like to mention is we talked at other times about looking at the potential, even if you, as you're meeting with the county health director, or you're worried about the metrics. I do think there's a really strong argument to be made that our elementary schools, especially our youngest grades in elementary school, K1, K through 3, have opportunities to be in the building with their teachers. I think accessing technology is really, really hard for them, and that experience is really important. I'm pushing as much as I can because I think it's really important that we have these conversations. I think our families are asking it of us, and I think engagement with them is important. I want to ask them what they're thinking. It's important that we ask the right questions. So I take Sam's point really carefully, and Christy's engagement piece. But I would really like to see the availability to have our elementary school, at least our kindergarten students, maybe K through 3 even, back in our buildings as quickly as we can, and giving them that opportunity. I think that that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that younger students should not have to take the responsibility for the actions that the rest of the city citizens may be taking, raising risks or whatever. Education is always paramount for younger students, for sure. So I second that.
All right. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to remind everybody that this board did make a decision to reevaluate this process at the midterm, and I'm hoping that we can stay true to that. It is a little alarming and a little frustrating that we're kind of dragging and pushing the decision that we've made. I get that education is important, but as all of us have mentioned and have acknowledged, safety is also a key paramount issue for us as a school district, and that is also the safety of our students and our families in the city. And I do believe that we have a responsibility to the city to make sure that we're curving the trend lines of this pandemic and this illness down, and we're just not seeing that in the city. So I do want to keep that point fresh of mind that we do have a reevaluation process, and more or less a pretty solid plan about how we reintroduce in-person education at some point. We're 2 days into the school year, and I hope that we can maintain the decision that we've made already as a board.
Thanks for that, Nate. I appreciate that. Catherine, go ahead.
And I just want to point out that I think that we're also ignoring the fact that the numbers are really disproportionately affecting different parts of our community, and that we're hearing really strongly from some parts of our community that are less affected, and board members that are less affected by the COVID numbers. And that the COVID numbers are affecting certain parts of our population really strongly, and that we need to be really cognizant of that and how those kids are affected. And I think it is really disingenuous to say that K through 3 kids can go back to school and not affect their siblings and other students and teachers and the entire community. I mean, we cannot have K through 3 students go back and not affect the entire community and the entire, school. And what we've seen is that they do transmit the disease, and that's becoming more and more clear. We're seeing those studies come out every day. So I agree with Nate that, it's very disingenuous to say that younger students can go back without having an impact on the entire school system. I think we heard that from Superintendent Madden at the beginning of this meeting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a lesson that can be learned from other school districts, and certainly we can watch their
Yeah, we can
numbers.
we'll watch the numbers.
We are watching. Sam, did I see your hand as well?
yeah,
Or your
no,
microphone?
I was just gonna kind of underscore what Nate and Catherine said. I mean, I think let's just remember that there are neighborhoods where the positivity rate is in the high teens. And what I heard the superintendent say, which I like, is, let's stick with what we committed to, but let's see if there's more information that we can gather and, refine our approach, but not, like Nate said, I mean, we did make a commitment to all of our constituents and all of our employees, all of the stakeholders, that this is what we would do, and we would look at it at the end of October. And so, I think this is going to be hard, I mean, I don't think there was any doubt in anyone's mind that this was going to be difficult, and that our resources were going to be stretched thin. But I still feel so relieved and happy to be among people that I feel like are, and I feel that way about all of you. I feel like everybody in this virtual room, even when we disagree, at least we're facing the same reality. So I guess I want to take a second to be grateful for that, because I don't feel like that's something that you can take for granted across the board anymore. And even when we hear different things from our constituencies or from people that we're serving as educators, I feel like we're all looking at reality with clear eyes, and I have faith that we'll make the right decisions. So I'll just leave.
Thank you, Sam. I see Catherine and then Christy. Your sound is not on, Catherine.
Thank you. I'll just add on that, I know that Melissa and I are the people on the board that have students in the district, and I want nothing more than my child to go back to in-person school. She very much wants to do that, and I would love to have her be in school. It is something that she very much wants. I see the benefits of it. I understand that. Every day when she's in front of her computer, it is not something that fills me with any joy. I would love to have her be in school with her peers. She would like that too. But I feel like this is not a political decision for me in any way. This is a safety decision for me. I believe that this is about the safety of our employees and our students and their families. This is about keeping our families and our employees healthy, and making sure that we can have their health safeguarded and keeping our people safe. And that's what I want. I would love to have my child in school doing the things that she loves to do, because she's missing those things. She does not play sports. The things that she does in school, she cannot do. She is missing. She's not able to play her sport because she doesn't play a sport. She cannot go in and do the things that she does. So she's missing all those things. And I would love to have her do those things. She's a senior, and she's missing her senior year. And I would love for her to do those things. And it hurts my heart not to have her do those things this year. But it is because she believes also that we are keeping people safe. We are keeping people alive, in fact, by keeping people at home. And that's why we're doing this. And it is not because of politics, but it is because we believe that grandparents and teachers deserve to be alive. We believe that students deserve to have healthy lungs, healthy livers, and healthy brains when they go on in their lives. We do not know what this virus does. We do not know everything that this virus does to people's bodies yet. We will know sometime. but we do not know yet. And we want people to be safe. We want them to be alive. We want our kids to have healthy lives. And that's why it is important for us to have remote learning until we know what kind of consequences this virus has and how it impacts people in our district.
Thank you, Catherine. Go ahead, Christy.
So this is one of the great things of why I love being on a board. And that is that, we have, 7 people that come together, from different parts of our city that have different experiences in their lives. They interact with sometimes the same, but different people. And I think that what's important, at least what I've been hearing, is not us pushing for a change, because we definitely, have voted as a board to go into remote. I think that starting with what superintendent actually said was that the county health department wants to come together and look at the metrics, and how that's affected and what those positivity rates are, and also, the transfer rates. So I don't hear us saying, any of us that, we're asking for us to launch into something different than what we voted on, but to say, as we did that night when we did vote, that we stay fluid, that we keep up on the science, that we make sure that we're getting good information, that, I think it's important that the first thing that we need to remember as a 7-man board or 7-person board is that, we need to work together and we need to respect one another's opinions and always do it in the best of ways that we can. And so I'm sorry, Dante, I should have included you, an 8-person board, because you are a part of this board. And I think that student voice is important. But I don't want us to get distracted tonight because, we've asked for the superintendent to look at specific things or to make sure that we're staying up on it, because that was a part of our conversation when we decided to go remote. All of us had agreed that, yes, it was a good decision, as Catherine has pointed out, and Nate and Sam, but that doesn't mean that, that other part of the conversation should be ignored. And so I've enjoyed this conversation tonight. I think it's the right conversation for us to have, is to continue to challenge, and make sure that as we've all said, that every kid is being served in whatever way possible, and that we challenge, the things that we're hearing, to make sure that we share with one another what we're hearing. So superintendent, I think that it's a lot of things that we've talked about tonight. There's no doubt about that. But for me, I think that we continue to say, this is what our decision was. These are the metrics that we're using. You're putting together a team to look at it with the county health, and we continue to move forward and make sure that we're providing, the remote education that we asked for, but also looking and continue to make sure that, we're still within, are those metrics the right metrics to be using, as you yourself said. So I think that, let's just keep moving forward, and let's keep having good, positive conversations and allow for this space to be a safe space so that we can have honest and transparent conversations. And I really appreciated everybody's comments tonight, and let's just keep moving forward. So thanks.
Thanks, Christy. I think this has been a great conversation and a healthy conversation. I appreciate that. Is that a thumbs up, Mike, or did you want to say something?
One last thought, Christy. It was only a 6-member board that voted for this. Remember, I voted against it.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you all for this conversation. I know we've taken more time than we allotted for it, but I think it's been good to have. And Superintendent, thank you for leading that conversation and hearing these viewpoints. I think that's wonderful. Would you like to conclude then with a few remarks before we move to our discussion agenda?
No, I appreciate the discussion and the feedback as well. And we'll move forward. We'll meet with the health department. We'll gather some information. And like I said, we'll figure out how to share that information through SICs and SCCs and what kind of feedback we want to get from them. But we can do that. We'll have conversations in cabinet to kind of determine those pieces. And then the only last thing I would say is, if Brian and Becky and Chris, they can get off when we're done with this part. So if you guys want to leave the meeting, that's certainly okay with me.
Been a long day. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate that. Appreciate your work and feedback.
Thank you all.
Moving to our discussion agenda. The first item on our discussion agenda is the RFP process. And for that, I'm going to turn to Vice President Salazar, because he has led this process, and I want to have him give the opportunity to present that to the board. So thank you, Vice President Salazar.
Thank you, President Ford. I just am happy to announce that, we're still on track relative to the plan and timeline that this board set out in the RFP process in order to hire a full-time contracted superintendent. As reported last week, we had the RFP published on BidSync. It went out to thousands of entities across this country on July 27th. The RFP did close on August 20th. As I mentioned last board meeting, we had 7 proposals that the RFP committee, which consisted of board members Sweat, Kennedy, evaluated, along with our purchasing director in the district, Tyler Barnes, who did on this process as well. So we did evaluate all 7 proposals and score them on September 3rd. We were able to narrow down the 7 proposals to 4 consultants that we did interview on September 9th. And based on those interviews, and then of course the pricing evaluation for each firm, we were able to unanimously make a recommendation to this board, which is what we're doing tonight, of Ray and Associates. Attached to the agenda, you'll find a summary that Tyler put together that was addressed to the board, Interim Superintendent Madden. So I would open it up for discussion and see if board members Sweat and Kennedy have anything that they would like to add that I may have left out of the summary.
Thanks, Nate.
For a discussion, President Ford.
Yes, so I'm hoping that everybody's had a chance then to read the attachment and has seen Ray and Associates as the proposed superintendent search. And if there's discussion, okay. I'm happy to take a motion right now to move this to action so that we can take action on it right now.
I make the motion that we move this item to our action.
And a second from Catherine. All right, any discussion to the motion to move it to action? Let's go ahead and vote, beginning with you, Michelle.
Michelle Tuitpo, yes.
Mike Namalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
I'm Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so now we've moved this to our action. Do I have anybody opposed to taking action on this right now? Okay, I'll take a motion right now.
President Ford, I'd like to make the motion that we approve Ray and Associates as our consultant firm as we search for a new superintendent.
Do I have a second to that motion? Christy?
Second.
Okay, so I've got a motion by Nate and a second by Christy. Any discussion to having Ray and Associates be our consultant for the superintendent search? Christy?
I would just like to thank Nate and Catherine for working together on the procurement, and enjoyed going through the vendors and also having those interviews. So thank you, Nate and Catherine. I appreciate the time that we spent together, and to Tyler, who was our facilitator. So thank you so much.
I felt the same way, Christy. It was a pleasure to spend that time with you the day after the inland hurricane.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it kept us busy over the 2 weeks between our last board meeting. So, but also a very enlightening process.
Well, I know that it's taken a lot of time, but it's important time, and we need to do this work, and it's an important part of our responsibility. Thank you for the time you've spent on it. And now, Nate, I think you've invited some guests to join us just for a quick introduction. I'll let you
Certainly, and
introduce them.
I was hoping that we could potentially just get through the motion if we could, President Ford, and I think we still have it pending on the table.
Do that. Let's go ahead and vote on the motion.
Mike DeMalco, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hanson, yes.
Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Excellent. Well, again, just a huge gratitude to everybody that participated in this process and to this board. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure if somebody's unmuted. But nonetheless, I did want to just take a few minutes to introduce Ryan Ray and Molly Schwartzoff, who will be our consultants working with us throughout this next year and throughout our process. One, just to have them introduce themselves, and then also just give us a sense of what our next steps might be with them in the most immediate future. Ryan and Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay, great. All right. Awesome. Well, we're really excited to be part of this process and to be selected. We've done some of the largest systems in the country, all the way down to districts of like, so, thank you for allowing us to your for the next leader. And please don't judge me for my 2 light bulbs that are in my office. So I appreciate that. But no, we really are excited, and I know you want to say something.
Yeah, we're just super thrilled to be helping you all find your next superintendent. I can't tell you how excited we are. I loved meeting with your board the other day, your partial board, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you and find you an awesome leader. I'm so thrilled.
Yeah, so go ahead and say this is your process. My process. I'm going to tell you how we've done things in the past. This is the most important thing that you can do as a board member for Salt Lake City. So this is your number one job. So we are here with you throughout the whole process. And again, and we're open to questions too, right, if you want.
I'm just wondering if Ryan and Molly, if you could give us a sense of what your next steps might be with us in the next week or so.
Yeah, so our thing is we're going to want to go ahead and set up a first meeting with you at some point. And we can go ahead and get in touch with, I believe it's Tyler, correct, Molly? All right, yep. So we'll get in touch with Tyler to go ahead and set up a first meeting. But the big thing that we want to go ahead and do is set up one-on-one board member interviews with you. And so we can go ahead and have those discussions. Molly and I will probably split those up and we'll have those discussions with you. And those discussions probably will go ahead and be maybe 30 minutes at tops. And so then we'll go ahead and set up the first meeting and talk about where we're going to advertise, salary, as well as, who's our board contact, as well as who is our district contact. Molly, am I forgetting anything?
No, I think the biggest thing is when we'll do the one-on-one interviews, like Brian said, and we'll get to know everybody. But then for that first meeting, the most important thing that we can stress is to bring your calendars with you or have them prepared. The one thing we are going to try to nail down is the timeline. Once we get the timeline nailed down, we want to stick with it so that our candidates know what's going on, so your community knows what's going on, And so we all know what's going on. So that's the biggest things that I really want to stress is everybody bring your calendars. I know that this school year is all kinds of crazy with kids' activities and trying to learn from home and hybrid learning. I know that it's just a mess. I've got children of my own, so I understand and I feel your pain. But if we could all bring our calendars, that way we can set it in stone so that when we move forward, everybody knows what's going on and what's coming up around the next curve.
Yep.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Yeah, and just so you know, I've had a couple of different people contact us. Somehow they found out that we are the firm. And so they've already been in contact with us and said, hey, I'm interested. And so just so you know, Molly and I were already aggressively recruiting.
Thank you. I love that. As soon as our agenda got posted with that attachment, I'm sure the word got out. But I'm glad we approved it tonight, and we're really looking forward to working with you. Do you have final comments, Nate?
No, just more gratitude around the table to our board and to Christy and to Catherine for working on this process with me, and then of course to Tyler and everybody else involved on his team and helping us make this happen. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having us tonight. We're excited to be here with you, and we will go ahead and sign off because I'm sure.
Before you go, I think Board Member Hanson wants to say something.
Absolutely. I just thought Dr. Buendia raised her hand. Did you have a question or?
I'm sorry, Sandra, I didn't see you. But go ahead. Thanks, Sam.
No, there was some, it was really difficult to hear. There was some sound issues. I was just kind of like trying to politely ask to have it resolved. So I apologize, but thank you, Board Member Hanson, for noticing my hand go up. I was hoping nobody would, like after I put it down, I was hoping nobody would catch me, but thank you.
No worries.
Melissa, I just want Ryan to know that after you go off this call, we're totally talking about those lights.
No, I know. I for those of you that don't have those the knowledge or the background of me, I have 2.5-year-old twin girls, and I have a newborn that is probably 8 weeks, I would say. And so the two lights, I'll try to get fixed in the near future, but it's just not on my priority list right now.
Hold those babies.
Yeah, I certainly will. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll say goodbye to you, and we'll be working with you in the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next item on our agenda is a request from Board Member Hanson to ask our policy subcommittee if they're interested or willing to, and the board, if we're interested and willing to move to the policy subcommittee and ask them to work on an RDA policy. As you'll recall, this is something that we talked about, have been talking about for a little while, and at Sam's asking us to do that. And so I'm going to let him start and tell us what he's thinking about in this discussion agenda item.
Thank you, President Ford. This was just sort of a loose thread from last year. We talked about this a little bit last year, and I was able to attend a presentation at USBA at a USBA conference up in Midway, Utah, that was given by Leon Wilcox, who's the business administrator at Canyons. And I think the presentation was called something like Redevelopment Agencies, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And so he had a policy that he had developed with his board that we looked at in that presentation. And there was also a great discussion at a legislative interim meeting. It was the Workforce Services and Economic Development Interim Committee last year of the state legislature, where they talked about this issue. So just to give a little background, and anybody who understands this stuff better than me, feel free to interrupt me. But these tax increment areas, these redevelopment agency areas or community development agency areas, they have different names. But basically what happens is, they draw a line around an area of your city or your county, and they create an area to gather tax increment. And the way that works is that the increment, the property tax income is frozen for those tax entities such as the school district for a certain number of years as the property value grows, either because some one project is being built or some series of development or redevelopment projects are happening. So, we don't have to get into a long discussion of any of that because that's obviously a huge topic, but and I apologize I didn't get this attached. But I thought that the discussion at the USBA meeting was really interesting because I was able to meet board members from across the state who had different experiences with these projects, some really good and some really negative. And, of course, we feel a lot of pressure to participate in these projects because we want to be good partners to our municipal counterparts. So if people are interested, I can read some of this policy or some of this document that Mr. Wilcox wrote, or we could just send it to the policy subcommittee and let them look at it. I think their policy is really good. It basically just creates some guidelines to make sure that these agreements are really a benefit to the district and to the kids, and not just to other economic development factors at play. So I'm happy to read some of this to you, or if we're comfortable just sending it to the policy committee, I'm happy to do that too. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it at least once, because that's sort of my understanding is that's sort of the tradition when you have a new policy, right, is to talk about it, send it to policy committee, and then bring it back. So
right,
we can talk more about this if people are interested, or we can kind of leave it there.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks for that feedback. And rather than read right now, I have a couple of hands from Christina Kindle and from Christy. Christy, do you want to start?
So thanks so much. I've always loved talking about policy, and when we're looking at, a new policy. So there's two things I have going on in my head right now. And so I think what would be helpful is that what would be the issues, that we would want to talk about that we feel are very specific outside of because, the code gives now the school district the ability to say yes or no, right? Where in the past we hadn't been able to do that. They would just implement, an RDA or a CDA. So I would want to know, Sam, what issues specifically would we want to talk about? And then I would like to suggest to the board that because I'm your RDA representative, for the school district, with the city, that I could go to that board and discuss with them the things that we feel like are issues, are these guidelines or things that, we could put in place as we try and form a better partnership around the RDAs and CDAs. Because I don't want the city council or the RDA board to think that we're coming out defensively, right off the bat. Let's go in and say, here are some things that we're thinking about, around these either guidelines that we want to put in place or actually, to have a better relationship, with the RDA board. I think that would be a good thing for us. I see that I have seen that work better in the past, that we've been able to go in and do that. So if we could identify those issues first before we went into the policy committee, give me an opportunity to talk to the RDA board, and then come back and give you feedback that might help us decide whether we want to put in some sort of a process or a policy, or talk about how we want to handle that with just a little bit more information. I know that when Canyons put theirs together, they have multiple municipalities that they have to deal with. whereas we just have one, which makes us
Right.
lucky, that we just have the one municipality. And so I would just say, if the board, let's talk about this. And if you're interested, I would be happy to go, and if Ms. Kendall would go with me, or even President Ford and Vice President Salazar, that we could go in and we could have a conversation about, here's some of the things that we'd like to talk about before we start to put a policy and guidelines together. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, so I'm gonna be really honest with you. I feel like we had a lot of great discussion last year when we were speaking. Oh, did you want to speak first, Christina?
Yeah, I wanted to say, in case, and Board President Ford, you might remember this, because of the conversation Sam had last year, we actually hired someone to write Lake City School District guiding principles for tax increment participation. So we hired Randy Sant, I think his name was, to come in and write an actual process and guidelines document for the board. And I know that was shared with board leadership when it was Tiffany and Melissa, and I'm not sure it was shared with the whole board, but he was involved in writing the Canyons one, and so it was definitely patterned after the Canyons one. So I do have that document, and it's a multi-page document that we specifically hired someone to write for the board. So I was thinking that maybe that should be shared with all the board members so they could see what they had paid for, and if maybe that addressed board member Hansen's concerns, because it was in response to the concerns he raised last year. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember speaking about how there was going to be a process that we would. I was not aware that.
Yeah, I don't remember that
document had been generated. So that would be great if we could look at that. But I
sure, because I have it, I'm looking at it on an email, and it's multiple pages, and it was written for Salt Lake City School District. And the only reason I remembered it was because it was funny, because when I approved the contract was written that we were hiring someone to write policies for the district. And right. So when I was like, why am I approving a contract for someone to write policies for the district? Then it came back as like a guiding principles document for tax increment participation. So I'm happy to send this around to everyone so you can see the work that the professionals who worked with Canyons drafted for you, and it's specific. And then I'm happy to talk about it at the next board policy subcommittee on the 28th as well, if this doesn't meet everyone's needs.
I think, well, I'll let everyone else weigh in after I speak, but that sounds very reasonable to me, that we would all look at that document. I can send this Canyons policy and the kind of guiding principles that Leon Wilcox presented to the legislative committee, and we can have the policy subcommittee look at it, and we can have another discussion after that at the next possible. I guess that would be either the 1st or the 5th, or not the 1st, but the 6th or the 20th, whatever
of October. Yeah, and I think, and can I add to that? And I'll take comments from other board members, but thank you, Christina. I hadn't actually tracked that conversation, so thank you for bringing it up. It's just not in my memory at all, and I'm sorry about that. But the one thing I would add, Sam, I think this is a good plan, right? Would be to see if how the board feels about having Christy as our RDA rep, board leadership meet with city council and have that kind of relationship building conversation about where we're at and what we're looking for. We do that too. So in addition to what you're talking about,
we can do that too, I guess. And I don't want to be misconstrued as not valuing all the work that has gone into these in the past, because I know particularly, Christy, you had to do a ton of work. You served on that what was it called? The tax entity committee for many years, which now no longer exists. And that's one of the, and this is a very complicated issue that I've learned with a lot of vicissitudes that we could probably talk about all night. But I guess my feeling is now that that committee doesn't exist, and now that this is now a board decision, whereas before it was something where we would make a recommendation. I mean, I wasn't around, but where the board would make a recommendation and send that to the entity committee. That I just think these agreements they're a huge commitment, because you're talking 20, 25, 30 years. And this is, I guess I would encourage all of us board members, present and future, to kind of all be RDA reps to our counterparts on the city council. And I guess on a personal note, I would love to kind of work on this a little bit more while I'm still around. So of course, as many parallel conversations about it as we can have at a time, I think are positive. So if everyone's happy with that, I'm happy to just send these things on to the committee, and I'll maybe we can just send them to the whole board to look at, as well as
for sure
that Christina mentioned. Does that sound okay to everyone?
The whole board willing to look at that, move it to policy subcommittee as we have these after we have these conversations, or as we have these conversations. Is that what we're talking about? Sorry, I'm not tracking it very well.
No, I think it would be good for us to see what Christina has, for the policy that Sam has, for that to be sent to the whole board first. And then, from that point, we can say, yeah, go from there. But in the meantime, I think that you and Nate have already been talking with the city about setting a meeting. Is that right, with the city council? And so I think it's timely, for us to do that. I just, I just don't want them to see this as an aggressive move, which I don't think it is. I think it's, we need to be prudent in how we move forward and what those guidelines are, because I think, Sam, you proved your point well, because when we were in the middle of talking about that RDA, we had new board members come on, right? And so I think that it's difficult when you're in the middle of an RDA discussion. Our previous board members, had signed on to it, and then as new board members come on, it is a re-education of it. And so I think that it's important that we do have some sort of process in place that we all feel comfortable with. And but at the same time, I don't want the city to think that we're being an adversary, because I think it's important that we are invested in redeveloping our city, because that attracts people in and into our schools and into our economy in the city. So I think it's a good discussion. And I think, Alan has stayed really quiet during this whole thing. And he's such an integral part, of this conversation that, there's, I think it's a good conversation for us to have. So what you said, Melissa, I would like to see what Christina has, and with what Leon, has provided, and also some background from Alan, and bring that to our next meeting, so that we can, talk about it and what our next action step. That would be how I would feel. That would be me.
Do I have any other conversation from board members? I think this is a great and interesting thing. And I appreciate you, Sam, being always so thoughtful about what you bring to us. So sounds like we'll move forward, and we'll move forward pretty relatively quickly in the next meeting or two, be talking about this and moving it to policy subcommittee at some point, soon. Is that fair? It seems like we've got a process we're moving forward. Is everybody not okay?
Okay.
All right. I'm not seeing much feedback, but yeah, I thank you, Sam, for bringing this up, and thanks for moving it forward. Yeah, no, it's good for us to think about. I think our we've got a lot of things to track, a lot of things that we're responsible for.
Would it be okay with the board if I reached out to my counterpart on the city council, who's the RDA chair, and just let them know that this is something that we're talking about? Does everyone feel comfortable with that, or would you like me to wait?
I think any conversation about this is positive.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that. Okay. Thank you, Christy. Thanks. And thanks, Sam. Really do appreciate that. And next, I'm sensitive to the fact that we're running a little late, so we can, I think, move through the next two discussion items fairly quickly. You've seen attached to the agenda number 3 is board agenda topics for 2020-21. This isn't the first time you've seen this document, something that we've talked about before. It's generated by you, by us as a board in our planning meeting. Nate and I have gone through and kind of tentatively scheduled out some things, trying to be sensitive to the direction that the board has given us as well, that we have a lot on our plate with superintendent, and we've got a lot that we've got a lot that we're tackling the topic year. And so I hope you've had a chance to look at it and kind of check those dates. Want to make this a public document so that our community can be tracking the things that we're talking about. We also had a discussion with the superintendent about, as we have this document with tentative dates, that might be helpful to him and to his cabinet so that they can see when and what kinds of things we're looking at and when, so that they can be prepared, because I know that they'll be an integral part of those conversations. So with that introduction, probably over introduction, I'd love to have discussion from the board about how you feel about those dates. Please remember that they're tentative, and we just kind of plugged things in, Nate and I and Superintendent Madden together, so that we could kind of have a plan and share with you now, but it really is a rough draft. So love to hear what you have to go ahead with your comments.
Yeah, and I've had a chance to talk to a few board members about the document and the tentative dates, and would just like to emphasize President Ford's point that this is still a draft, and a lot of the topics that you see on the list, they're kind of housed under specific categories. And a lot of those topics, there's a few in particular, I'll use equity as an example, that are more or less an umbrella topic for a number of different, desires and agenda item topics that you all presented to us in our planning meeting. And then relative to the to be determined, that was more just trying to figure out how and where we plug those specific topics into agendas, and then of course our board meeting dates moving forward. So I just want to just emphasize that it's not an oversight on our end as board leadership and superintendency, but I do know that there's some really pressing topics and decisions that we've made as a board that we want to respect and make sure that we get on the agenda where it's appropriate and where it makes sense. So I just want to emphasize that to all of us as we continue the discussion.
I have one question. Why are we discussing school resource officers?
Because that's a topic that board members wanted to discuss. Sam, I sorry, my internet is you're kind of flashing in and out, so I'm sorry that I can't track you very well. So if you want to, maybe Nate can do that, or if you want to just unmute yourself and speak.
I was just going to say, I appreciate all the work that the three of you have done and fitting things in, especially fitting things in that I wanted to talk about before I depart at the end of the year. I wanted to mention that we received an email from some students about a petition. It's called Diversify Our Narrative, and it's basically a petition about making sure that we have a literature and teaching resources that represent our student body. And I told the representative of that group that we might address some of those issues. And I know Dr. Hall wrote an email to her that addressed some of that too. And some of it's probably state board questions at the end of the day too. But I told her that we would we would try if we could to address some of those concerns on that October 20th study session. So
that is specifically what that conversation is tracking. And I've talked to Dr. Hall about it, and she's she's put together a lot of resources already. But that conversation is one that's tentatively scheduled for October. But again, these are tentative dates. But it's one that we've been tracking for a little while. Something that's important to board members and important to our community. Sorry, go ahead, Christy.
Sam, thanks for bringing that up. One of the things when I got that email is I reached out to my language arts teachers over at Highland and asked them the question, that the students are proposing. What does the literature look like right now that they are integrating into their curriculum around, people of color, equity issues, and I was absolutely blown away by the work that they're already doing, and shared that with Dr. Hall. And I think that it's very timely. But one of the things I would like our board to consider is putting together, instead of us talking about it at the board so quickly, is putting together a group of our language arts teachers from our from our comprehensive high schools, include students, and this group of students that are asking for this petition, for this conversation, and have them all come together. The teachers over at Highland were really excited about the idea of sitting down with students and talking about the literature that they would like to see in the curriculum. And I loved that idea. And, for Dr. Hall to be there and, to have our teachers come together and, maybe even ask our wonderful student board member, Donnie, to, be a part of that, to bring students together, because I thought, well, we can say, yeah, this is a great idea on our level, but I would really love to see that organic conversation at the school level, and then have them come back to us and give us a report, of what needs to change or what's happening right now, and what resources we can put towards this. Because I was just blown away by the three teachers and what they were doing already over at Highland, which I'm sure they're doing at East and West and Innovations and at Slicksy. And, so I was excited about this conversation. So I'm glad that you brought that up, Sam. I just throw it out to say, could we do it, maybe the other way, and have a group put together and then have them come and present to us.
So maybe push it back a little bit to do that, or could we start that now?
Yeah, I don't
maybe
know.
not.
I know that's a lot to ask right now for our teachers, but they were certainly willing to do it at Highland, and I think they would be at the schools.
I bet they'd be excited about it. So one of the values I see of doing this agenda topic this way is that as we have things like Christy and Sam, you're talking about, that we can make a part of the conversation as we see that topic coming up, I would love to hear that from you. And as a board, so that we work together, so that these conversations are relevant to the things that you're hearing as board members, and the things that were important to you as we set these topics in planning for the year, so that that will really help Nate and I and Superintendent Madden as we kind of make sure we have that relevant information that you're looking for as part of the conversation. So that's kind of we'd like to see this kind of exact conversation happening about each of those topics. So you can send us that feedback as you see those topics coming up. And really what I'd like is feedback on, are these dates pretty good? Should we kind of proceed with that? And obviously there's some TBDs in there that we want your feedback on, when you would like to see those brought to the board for conversation. Michelle?
I'm wondering too if we can bring in some teachers and students that have already implemented some of this cultural curriculum. So Slicksy already does some, and it's cross curriculum as well. So they have their whole humanities section where they have language arts, history, and I can't remember the other class. And they specifically have books for authors of color that are incorporated in their curriculum that's starting right now, and even having conversations even within their physics classes about that cultural relevancy within physics and within science. So I'm wondering too if we could also maybe incorporate some of those teachers and the students that are in those classes to also come and talk about, if we're doing this in October, that's a good, 2 months that they've already had under their belt. So maybe they can come and comment on like how that has helped them in their learning process.
I think that's a great idea. So yeah, let's do that. I would love to hear from students, and I think that's great. And other board members, if you hear of other opportunities in that same vein, that'd be great. And I wonder, Dottie, if it's something you're willing to help us participate in and help us with. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that my friends at West are the ones that are running this whole campaign, and I'm really proud of them. I also know that, like a lot of the board members said, a lot of teachers already employ the same academic rigor that is based in the petition, incorporating authors of color, etc. But I think that this is a conversation that also needs to permeate all levels of schooling and all subjects, like board member Michelle said with physics, and how people who were part of science were treated differently based on race, caste, gender. And I think the only reason reading books will not cut it for students to learn. I know that it hasn't cut it for me. I am still learning. And this needs to be a conversation that we think very, very big about. And so I urge you guys to absolutely bring in students and teachers, but also think bigger than just the petition and think for all the subjects that we have to say. Yeah, great.
Thanks, Dottie. Appreciate that. So are there other discussions to this agenda? Go ahead, Christy.
So I just wanted to add in, I was going to do this, I'm sorry that I didn't, about the census information. So the census, there's been a request that there is an extension on the census. And so what they're looking at is from the point that they reach out to all of the unresponsive homes, which is towards the end of September, and then take the additional time that they need to gather up all of the information. They're looking at actually not doing a report and turning the information into Congress until well into early spring next year. And so what that does for us is that really pushes that out for us. So the housing trends, looking at our boundary changes and the census would probably push us into a discussion, in late spring, early summer. And so with that being pushed out, it'll be interesting to see what the deadline will be for us to set our boundaries for the city council. So I would just say, let's just take all of that and push it to next year. That it's not going to be something that we're going to be able to calendar right now. It's going to be probably, that April, May, June, time for us to, once they get it to the numbers solidified and then sent out. So just wanted you to know that's, so Pam Perlick, the housing, the census, and then the boundary change for the school district precincts.
You're muted, Melissa.
All right, sorry about that. I saw Catherine's hand and then Sam's.
So thank you for these comments. I appreciate them. I also responded to the diversify our narrative, which is important to me as someone who studied literature. I thought it was interesting. I'd also like to know what SLEA, I also asked for SLEA's opinion on that. I'd like to have their input to diversify our narrative, as well as I asked for Tiffany Hall's opinion for that as well. And I appreciate the fact that she did weigh in on that. I know that many of our classes already do include a lot of those narratives already, but it would be great to see what teachers and students working together can add. So in doing that, and I also would like to see us think about continuing some of the discussions we've had about the anti-discrimination, anti-hate, as we look in district culturally responsive training for students and employees, that the things that we were pursuing in the last few months of the year that we've been pursuing and thinking about last year with some of our parents that were interested in some of those things based on some of the things that have happened in some of our schools. So I'd like to look at that too, if we're looking at how things are dovetailing. And I appreciate some of the other conversations and what Christy's saying about the census. I think that's a really important initiative. The only thing I'd like to do, and I appreciated the fact that Nate has already spoken to this, but I'd like to get started on Late Start. I know that we need to get going on that if we're going to pursue our goal of starting next fall. I know we have a committee that's already formed, and I just would like to see that committee pick up and start working again towards that. I think it was pretty organized. I know that Principal Chatterton was working on that, and I don't know if he has time to continue leading that. Love to see him do that. I think he's a great leader. If he has time, maybe we could work on, getting someone else from the committee going on that. But love to see that committee start meeting every other week, or whatever they think they can do, or every week. I think they're planning on meeting so we can get going on our goal to start a Late Start in next fall. I think that we'll be ready to do that, especially after this year where we've had a lot of change already. And that's what I wanted to add on this thing. The other thing I guess I would say that I said to Nate already is that I think that I'd love to see our goals, if we could just do the goals of literacy and social emotional learning, if we could just prioritize those in terms of how they stand on this page a little bit more clearly and prominently. Equity infuses everything, I think, in our agenda. I think that's pretty clear. But I think that's really important that we always keep that in mind, that we're about equity and excellence in everything. But that we need to make sure that we have our literacy and social emotional learning, our two priorities we've been working on for about three and a half years now, that we have those highlighted and prominent. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on this?
I was just gonna say, did we talk about having a legislative discussion before November? I feel like that was something that we talked about at some point, and
so that's one of our ongoing priorities.
Right.
That we have a list of things that we're working on. So that legislative one was a piece. Help me remember, Nate. There were several. It was relationships with city council and city and legislators, and then an ongoing conversation with what Yandri's doing too. So that is something that I don't have as our scheduled priorities, because I see those as ongoing conversations. And specifically, that legislative conversation will be sooner rather than later, but probably, sometime in the next several months. Is that fair? Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
I think that this is obviously every other year is a unique year because we have a changeover, in with the election. And so I think that what we're going to see, Sam, if we have seen it the way that it's happened in the past, is that it's going to be kind of dead, for a while. They're going to be doing their interim meetings, obviously, as Yandri and Alan, will be involved in those. But with the change of possibly representatives in the House or senators, then they really keep close to the vest what kind of bills there's going to be. And so then as soon as the session starts, then it's just like all the juniors, are just flooding, everything out there. And so I think what the best thing for us to do is just continue to get updates from Alan and Yandri about what's going on at the interim meetings, so that if there is anything that pops up. But what my guess is that it's, with it being an election year, it's going to be kind of quiet until January, and then the floodgates will open, at that point. But as long as we keep getting an update from USBA, and Catherine, being our representative, on the JLC, and both of us being on the board, we'll be continually getting those updates. So that's what's happened in the past. I don't know, Yandri, maybe you have other ideas or heard other things, but that's sort of what I've been hearing too.
I made a note of this in the chat, but there's actually an education interim committee meeting tomorrow. I'm happy to provide a recap if you would like that as well.
That'd be awesome, Andrea. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And this is a continuing conversation, and I really see it that way.
Yeah,
so we'll be working on that. Thanks for that feedback, Sam, and that information, Christy, and then obviously Catherine for your work on JLC and as well. I appreciate that. I don't see this as being needed to move to action. We'll just keep this as a working document, if that's fair. And we can add to it. Obviously, we have a process for adding topics to board meetings, but also, this is these are our priorities, and I want to make sure that we're honoring the things that you're interested in addressing in a timely manner. So thank you, and we'll keep working on it. So let's move on to the next item on our discussion agenda, which is the elementary assistant principals. There's a letter attached that was from the superintendent, Alan, from the superintendent's office. Anyway, I thank you to those who've worked on that and to this conversation. I'm happy to have a discussion now about this topic. I think you're all familiar or have had a chance to read the letter and are familiar with the discussion. It's something that I would like to see us take action on if we can do that. Anyway, so I'm opening up for discussion. Christy, then Sam.
I'm going to let Sam go first because I feel like it's just been, constant for me tonight. So, Sam, you go.
Okay.
I'll go after you.
Well, I appreciate the letter and the detail. It's interesting that we're talking about the RDA, and I didn't even know there was such a thing as an RDA mitigation payment. So I'll have to get Alan to explain that to me at some point. But I think this makes sense. I know that this is a discussion we had a lot this year among the negotiations team, and one-on-one between board members and administrators. And I just, I really value the work that our elementary school assistant principals do. I just think we have an outstanding crop of people coming up in through the ranks of administrators, and they've been wonderful mentors for me as I've tried to learn how to be a school board member. And so I just think we should value them because they're going to make great, elementary school principals and high school principals and who knows what else someday. So that's all I'll say about that, but I am fully in support of this.
So I just want to play devil's advocate just a little bit tonight and just put some information out there. For me tonight, I don't feel like I can vote for this on an action agenda, and for multiple reasons. And so what I'd like you to think about is I thought that the information that was provided to us around the urban issues money was really important, because the urban issues money is actually money that's flexible for us. And we've used it in multiple different ways over the years, whether it's been with the APs or whether it's been with pre-K or even after school programs, and I think even some of it goes towards, I've just lost my train of thought. Alan would be able to tell us. But one of the things that I appreciated was the conversation that a previous board had around the assistant principals and how important we thought they were. So I echo what you're saying, Sam, because we know that there's a high need in many of our schools that they need to have an assistant principal because of whether it's issues around behavior or, you know, just the management of a school, right? I think that was why we invested in using the monies from Urban Issues to go and say we wanted to do this, knowing that we weren't going to be able to do it for everybody. So what I want our board to think about is we still have 7 schools that don't have an assistant principal. And of those 7 schools, I would say all of them, you know, have one issue or another, or large enrollment, you know, behavioral issues, whatever it might be, that as we were going through this, we said, even if you take the 115,000 that was identified in the letter, that would pay for 1 FTE that we could split between 2 schools. And for me, although I know that this contract piece has risen to the top and I understand it, I also want us to remember that we committed that we wanted to continue to put APs in our other elementaries, these 7 that still don't have them. And, you know, the one question I asked Alan was, you know, the 115,000 that was identified, does that also include the 4.5% that we just negotiated? It does, Alan?
Yes. So what I did, I just downloaded all of the current APs and their current salary and said, okay, what if we paid them 223-day contract versus 213? And so that's where the number came from.
Okay. So as I'm thinking about this, I just want us to, you know, look at it. If this is really, you know, where we want to go, you know, that we look at doing contract days versus putting additional APs into these 7 schools that still don't have an AP in them. I also want us to think about, you know, I had a great conversation this morning with the Hillside SCC, and Mayor Mendenhall was on there. And one of the things that we have been talking about as a board is, especially through this pandemic, is how are we going to provide after school care, you know, or even after school programs, you know, in our school. And right now, some of that Urban Issues money is used towards doing that. And we haven't really come up with an idea of how we're going to help some of our parents that are in desperate need. And even if we go into the hybrid, we're still going to be looking at this after school issue. And one of the things that she told us this morning was that before the city council is a request of $1.6 million for Youth City. And in the Youth City, what that would do is it would provide more resources and more days. And she asked this morning, she says, is there not a way that we can not duplicate some of the services that we have in the city and partner together with the facilities that we have, whether they're low in numbers or other facilities with high need, where we can take the money that would be allocated from the city into Youth City and combine that together. And so as I look at this, I think, you know, the APs are important, but it wasn't a budget priority. It did come out of negotiations, but we have a lot of things on our plate around COVID right now, and that have really risen to the surface, and especially around our after school programs. So I would just ask that we ask Alan to come with a long range plan about this, because from what I understand, even though those RDA mitigation funds would come in, over time, that pot of money is not going to be able to sustain the salary increases and benefits. And so I just want us to have a picture of it, you know, of what does this really look like? And, you know, how much money is going to go into it? How much money in the Urban Issues can we partner up, you know, and look at some of those other issues that have been budget priorities around after school programs and our pre-K programs. So I'm just asking that we just put a hold on it and let Alan get us some numbers and crunch some things for us, and then bring it back. I might be the only one who feels this way tonight, but I just want to put that out there for all of you to think about, so that, you know, we can make a good budgetary decision, you know, that has a domino effect. It's not just, you know, making a decision to increase the contract days. It has a domino effect in a lot of different ways. So those are my thoughts around the APs. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Christy. Catherine, you had your hand up.
I'm okay. I've listened to the things, and I've read the letter, and I think that I see what Christy is saying. I think that we've discussed this at length as a board. I support this. I would like us to think about hiring at least another half AP for a couple more schools. I know that there's a school in my district that has a fairly large set of Title I students that does not have an AP and could use one. And I would like to see that school get one. But at the same time, I think that one thing that Sam talked about, about how they're great. These assistant principals have been great mentors, and they're on their way to be our principals, and they need to be valued. I also think that they do a lot of really significant work, and that they need those 10 days. And I think Sam implied this, and I'd just like to say it explicitly, that those 10 days are really important, and that our elementary schools are not being served as well as they could be because they don't have those extra 2 weeks. And that concerns me. I think that there's things that are missing. And I think we've actually discussed this quite a bit. And so seeing that letter with the reasoning that was given by the district superintendency is convincing to me, because I think we have talked about it a lot. And so I'm ready to make that decision, although I understand what Christy is saying. I do think that there are places, from what I've seen and the discussions that we've had with Mayor Mendenhall, that we can actually partner with her and use other funds. There are places that we can use for the after school programs. I'm very, very interested in that. Just like Christy says, I think that's a really big priority in my mind as we've been talking to Mayor Mendenhall and on other things. But I do think there are places that talk to Alan about where we can find those monies. So that's a big priority to me. But I'm ready to move on this, and I suggest that we call the question, actually.
So the question being,
well, I don't know that we have a motion yet.
We
but,
don't. So I would take a motion to move it to action.
Yeah, I move that we move this. I move that we move this to action.
I second it.
All right, motion. Any discussion to that motion? The motion to move to action. Alan's got. Go ahead, Alan.
I just want to make sure it's clear that this will be for next year. So the contracts are already done this year. So this will be for the 21-22 contract year. Just want to make sure that was clear.
I understand. We understand.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks for that clarification, Alan. Any other discussion?
I guess I would just add that I'd love to see, Alan, if you can also work on making at least another full-time FTE for assistant principals that could be split in half. That would be priority in my mind.
You know, I understand and fully support our assistant principals. We keep saying to Alan, here, find money. And we have no new money, you guys. There's no new money in our district. We used all of our new money. Our $6 million is gone. And so when you say, Alan, find new money, where is he going to do that? The only way that he can do that is take it from other places.
Right.
You know, so I mean, if that's the engagement that you want to do, is to say, here, let's take money from other places, then I guess that's the direction that this board's giving him. So okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Christy. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, I think we need to have, and this has been my impression from this conversation and earlier board discussions and also negotiation discussions, that we need to have a discussion about those schools that don't have an AP, and is that an issue that we need to fix because it's a fairness issue, or is it really not something we need to fix because there are more equitable ways of spending the money? But that's a big discussion, which we'll have to have at some point. And that would be a pretty significant amount of money. This is really not that much money, and it brings these people onto the same number of days with the rest of their administrative peers. I think we should go ahead and do it. I think we're going to start to lose some of these people who are some of our most promising employees if we don't give them the kind of support that other districts give their APs. And I think, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Christy, about after school programming and things like that. I think this is almost a prerequisite to that, because a lot of these principals, especially at the elementary level, have to administrate the after school program and have to administrate any summer programming. So I agree with Catherine. I think we should go ahead and move on this tonight. I think it's kind of a prerequisite to that next discussion about AP support. Benyon and Wasatch and Indian Hills, and I can't remember the other schools on that list of 7 schools, but I think I certainly support us having that discussion at some point, but I think we should go ahead and move on this now.
Are there any more discussion to the motion to move it to action? Okay, let's go ahead and vote on moving this to action.
Michelle Tuitabo, yes.
Mike DeMalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, no.
Okay, so that is the only remaining. That's the only item now on our action agenda. So I'll take a motion on the elementary assistant principals for action.
I move that we accept the proposal as written by the superintendency.
Second the motion.
Any discussion to the motion? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote.
Michelle Tuitabo, yes.
Mike DeMalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, I'm abstaining.
All right, thank you. So that motion passes. The last remaining item on our agenda is board member reports. So we'll start. How about with you, Dottie? Do you have something you want to share with us?
Not specifically. I just wanted to say, I know my teachers called me before school started, so they're working hard. You guys are all working really hard, and I'm really proud of this board, and so I'm really happy to be here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a board member report? Michelle?
So I was able to go to a couple of SCC meetings this week so far. A few things that came up for both of the meetings, the vaping policy, and coming up with something which the West High folks, they knew that there was a policy through the district, but it was in a different place, and they thought it was under G22, but it's actually under S3. So that was taken care of, and so they didn't have to worry about that. They also talked about the rebuilding and looking at keeping the facade of the structure, but kind of the outside, that nice element that's already been there for so long, but maybe having teacher input on changing the inside so that it flows a lot better. They talked about air circulation, which Sam, I'm glad you brought that up. I was trying to find the name of it as you were talking to them, but he brought up the clean air or the clean energy resolution that we passed. And so that should help with kind of that process of clean air. One thing that also came up with was a concern about the public comment, and Melissa, you brought this up at the beginning of this meeting, about how we can have public comment on this virtual format. So that was a big concern by some of the community members there. Specifically, they had a representative from the Anti-Defamation League that was at our meeting last night, or not last night, sorry, Monday night. that they would really like to have to come and present and speak for a few minutes to the board. And then I think Newman, they're looking at their literacy testing. That's something that's on their agenda. That's pretty high up. And then a working bookmobile. And so they've been looking for funding and they have 2 possible donors, which was really exciting. So that's all I have.
That's a lot. Thanks, Michelle. And it's been a long couple days, but Monday actually was yesterday. So
you see how my life is right now.
Yeah, you're busy. Thank you for that. Any other board member reports? All right. It's 9:40. We've gone past our time. I'm going to turn the time to the superintendent. Oh, Nate, go ahead. Sorry.
I think board member Namalka raised his hand.
Thanks for that, Nate. Mike, did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. I'm getting along an activity in my area we have a couple of large groups of Spanish speaking groups, and I'm getting a lot of activity in my area from English learners. They are being totally, they're not getting anything. I hate to say this. We have 4 hours that we're supposed to be giving them every day in instruction. They go on Lexia, they go on STS math, they go to specials. So they get a couple of hours to actually teach something. And they're not doing anything. I don't like to be negative, but those kids are getting nothing on, almost nothing. And I don't know how to solve the problem. I don't know whether this board can even solve the problem until we go back face to face. And I think that's the only way that problem will ever be solved, is when we go back to face. And I think that ought to be on the board agenda next time, October. We need to make a decision, and part of the decision is to say, hey, let's do it. I have grandkids all along that Wasatch Front. Some have been back to school for 3 weeks. We're 3 weeks behind some of them. Not one of them, not one has ever missed a day of school in 3 weeks. This board needs to make a decision, and just buck up and do what's right for these kids. And I don't care if it's a kindergarten through 3rd grade or whatever. They need to be back to school face to face. If we can't make it, and we ought to, somebody else in here can make it. That's all I got to say.
Nate, did you have something you wanted to add for your report?
No, just acknowledging board member Namalka's request to give a report.
Thanks for helping me with that. My internet's been a little spotty tonight. I appreciate the support. Superintendent, I'd like to let you give us some closing words of wisdom.
Well, thanks for the conversation tonight. Again, it's helpful. I think we have some thoughts on how to move forward from here in a thoughtful way. So we will do that. We'll meet with the health department. We'll gather meet with cabinet, and we will share that with you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sam.
Sorry, I forgot that I was going to say this, and because Michelle reported on the meeting at West that we went to together. But the one thing I wanted to add was that I have a couple of colleagues and friends that are serving on the state board's assessment committee, and they have come up with a survey on assessment across the state, and that they're going to use to advise the state board about assessment decisions going forward. So I think the due date for that is September 18th to fill that out. So I might send it to you, Superintendent, and see if we can fill that out to SCCs and principals to get some input from our district.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks. And before we say goodnight, I'd like to thank the superintendent's cabinet for being here. Alan Kersley, we're glad you're here. Let's see. Moselle Wharton, thanks for being with us and for all the work you do. Sandra, we appreciate what you're doing. It's important. It's an important time for the work you're doing. And Tiffany, I know that you're doing an enormous amount of work. Thank you for being with us all night tonight. And Yandri, I think your job has really been in the spotlight lately too. So thank you for joining us tonight. And Roberto Munoz, we're always happy when you're here. Thank you for joining us. Also Christina Kindle, we appreciate the work you do. And then Sam, Sam Quantz, thanks for being here and for the work. I think hopefully you felt the gratitude for really the impossible task that's been asked of, well, all of you. But at the moment, Sam and computers, thanks for making them appear where no computers seem to be. So thank you for that. Thank you, and thank you, board members. Nope.
Really? They're still going?
Okay. All right. We are off. Meeting adjourned unless there's other. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.